Good evening. I'd like to call to order our Wheat Ridge City Council meeting for June 8th, 2026. Please rise as you are able to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll of the members?
Rachel Hulteen.
Present.
Dan Larson.
Here.
Kathleen Martell.
Here.
Scott Ohm.
Here.
Mike Okada.
Here.
Patrick Quinn.
Present, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Jenny Snell.
Present.
Susan Wood.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Councilors, in your packet, we have meeting minutes and notes from City Council study session on May 4th, City Council meeting May 11th, City Council special study session May 11th, and City Council special meeting on May 18th. Do we have any questions or changes to the minutes? We do not, so we'll thank the clerk for her work on that. We'll go to approval of the agenda, and we'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor. For tonight's agenda, I am proposing we remove agenda item number 1A, which is Resolution 27-2026, a resolution amending the 2026 fiscal year general fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $9,600 for the purpose of equity audit services. And I am asking that we remove it tonight to give the IDEA committee a chance to review this particular scope of work to make sure it's in alignment with the consensus that council reached in January. Once they've had a chance to do that, then we will bring it back here to council and we will consider it under decisions, resolutions, and motions.
Thank you. Do we have any objections to that? Seeing none, we will go ahead and have that removed from our agenda for tonight and move it forward. And we will go ahead and go to our proclamations and ceremony. If I may have Dr. Alexis Hoffling join me up here. Welcome. We have a proclamation tonight for National LGBTQ Pride Month for June 2026. Whereas the City of Wheat Ridge cherishes the value and dignity of each person and appreciates the importance of equity and freedom. And whereas all are welcome in the City of Wheat Ridge to live, work, play, and every family deserves a place to call home where they feel safe, happy, and supported by friends and neighbors. And whereas the city denounces prejudice and unfair discrimination based on age, gender, identity, gender expression, race, color, religion, marital status, national origin, sexual orientation, or physical attributes as an affront to our fundamental principles. And whereas during lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, LGBTQ+ Pride Month, we reflect on the progress we have made as a nation in the fight for justice, inclusion, and equity, while reaffirming our commitment to do more to support LGBTQ+ rights. And whereas today the rights of LGBTQ+ Americans are under relentless attack, and many of these individuals continue to face discrimination and cruel, persistent efforts to undermine their human rights. And whereas, despite being marginalized, LGBTQ+ people continue to celebrate authenticity, acceptance, and love. And whereas we appreciate the cultural, civic, and economic contributions of our LGBTQ+ community, which strengthen our social welfare. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Corey Stites, Mayor of the City of Wheat Ridge, and the Wheat Ridge City Council do hereby declare the month of June 2026 as LGBTQ+ Pride Month. And we honor the resilience of the LGBTQ+ people who are fighting to live authentically and freely. We reaffirm our belief that the LGBTQ+ rights are human rights, and we recommit to delivering protection, safety, and equity to the LGBTQ+ families so that everyone can realize the full promise of America. A witness thereof on this 8th day of June, 2026. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Wheat Ridge, for being a magnificent place to get to be called for me to get to call home. I think it's easy sometimes to overlook the value of public statements like this. You know, I spent a lot of my life, my early adulthood, in a place feeling like Pride was about celebration, and it absolutely is, and we have a lot to celebrate about ourselves and our struggles and our victories. But that is only half of it, right? The other half is that Pride is a protest, it is a struggle, it is a fight that continues. And through my 20s and my teens, the celebration part felt really prominent. And there was a continual march, sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but a real sense of ongoing progress for our community, for our country, around queer welcoming, LGBTQ rights and belonging. You know, it was 11 years ago that Obergefell was decided this month in June 2015, securing equal marriage rights nationally. And in the decades running up to that, things felt really optimistic, right? There were challenges, and there still are, and I'm cognizant that as a white queer person, things were sometimes more optimistic for me than they were for some of my brothers and sisters and siblings of color. But that is not the entire story. And I think many of us are more cognizant now in the last 5-8 years of the increased hostility and persecution. And things really feel like we are more on the back foot now in many regards. We are losing rights. What felt, I think, for many people like a totally settled issue of marriage equality is back in the crosshairs of bigots who would see us move backwards. Not to mention all of the attacks and the choosing of queer youth to be a wedge for political gain at the expense of the health, safety, and blood of my community members, our community members. So I want to say thank you for taking a stand today. And I also want to encourage all of you to stay vigilant and stay on the lookout for more opportunities to be active allies, to engage in the protest part of Pride, not just in June, but around the whole calendar year. There will be more opportunities coming, and it's going to get harder before it gets better. There are a number of queerphobic ballot initiatives that will be on our ballots this fall, so stay tuned for that, and happy to talk about that to anyone with more questions. I don't need to take time about that right now, but thank you all, and I look forward to getting through all of this with all of you. Thank you.
If I may have Kia Ruiz, Danny Coben, and Derek Deese join me up here. We have another proclamation tonight in honor of Juneteenth, June 19th, 2026. Whereas this nation was founded on the principles stated in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but in which people who were black were held in slavery. And whereas President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, which states that all persons held as slaves within a state or designated part of a state shall be thenceforth forever free, changing the legal status of 3.5 million enslaved people who were black from slave to free. And whereas the Emancipation Proclamation paved the way for the 13th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, which formally abolished slavery in the United States of America. And whereas news of the Emancipation Proclamation did not reach most distant slave states until federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people be freed. And whereas The day of respect and remembrance, called Juneteenth, a combination of words June and 19th, is observed as an important day in our nation's history. And whereas Juneteenth is also known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, and Cell Liberation Day, and is a federal holiday celebrated on June 19th. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates African American freedom and serves as a reminder of the inequities faced by Black people throughout our nation's history. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Corey Stites, Mayor of the City of Wheat Ridge, and the Wheat Ridge City Council, call upon the City of Wheat Ridge to join us in recognizing Juneteenth, and call upon the people of Wheat Ridge to acknowledge and condemn the history of slavery in our nation and recognize how the impact of America's original sin remains. And I call on every person to celebrate Juneteenth and recommit to working together to eradicate systematic racism and inequality in our society forever. In witness thereof, on this day, on this 8th day of June 2026.
Hey, everybody. Juneteenth. I know this kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people. I think I accepted this proclamation maybe about 5 years ago. In context of 2026, this is a really good time to talk about it. Our nation's 250th birthday, the Declaration of Independence. There's like a frame of it at History Colorado this week. I hope you all go to see it. And the 150th anniversary for the state of Colorado. I'm here with Danny. We're both parents at Mountain Phoenix Community School, and just kind of want to give some context about what this means. And I know that there was a shelved decision-making piece tonight about potential audit with DEI within the city. I'm going to give a little bit of information here about economics in my own family. So History Nebraska right now is actually doing research on my family. Harriet and Miles Whitehall, my great-great-grandfather. He came to Missouri from North Carolina in the 1830s when he was a baby, and he was enslaved and married Harriet Whitehall in Missouri. He was owned by Spencer Hall Gregory. In 1860, census records show that Spencer Hall Gregory had a wealth of $142,000 in Missouri. In 1870, that went down to $82,000. This man had such a grudge about emancipation and losing his 32 enslaved people that on his obituary, it also includes financial records. What does this mean, though? Like, that jump from $82,000, even though he says he lost a lot of money, that still would have been over $2.5 million if we look at it now. There is a missing piece there of generational wealth and what a lot of people have not had access to. When we think about how that translates into the city of Wheat Ridge, where we almost even have this proclamation tonight, there are 3.1% Black people according to the Census Quick Facts here. That's 960 Black people in the city. You almost didn't find Black people to show up here for the proclamation. Right now, most people, if they have a Black friend, the same Black friend is a Black friend for everybody. Danny, you and I, we're like everybody's Black friend at the school. No, I mean, I'm serious though. So like, what does this mean though when we're looking at economic audits now and how money moves in communities? We know that there's already income disparity with how women have their job titles compared to how men and the money that comes in per dollar. That even goes down even further if you're not white and you have like a female identity or if you're just not white. We need to look at these economic machines right now because money flows through more when you have equity in your process with who your vendors are. And I know there have been questions about the cameras that are like getting our tickets within the city and how much of every dollar stays within the city, how money moves, how money flows. I want you to think about this economic generation that this man was so mad that in 1870 he had $82,000 that he took it to his grave. But what does that happen when that money moves around? My family missed that because they were enslaved. Miles Whitehall escaped enslavement in 1863. He was in the 62nd Regiment that went down to Texas. He was in Galveston. He was there on the coast to keep the Confederates from fleeing. What the 62nd Regiment did, people, former slaves that had missed out on generational wealth, they combined $5,000, and that is a lasting memory of Lincoln University in Missouri. Money moves when you look at equity and how money is generated. That's my family. Like I said, they didn't come to Colorado. Colorado was violent. Homestead Act missed everybody. Indians are getting extirpated from here. We have a chance to right some wrongs, especially if we look at how we audit and how we move money in the city. Thank you so much for this proclamation.
All right, we will go on to public comment. This is our public's right to speak. Citizens will have up to 3 minutes to speak on any agenda item not, or any item not on the agenda tonight. We will also have a special study session, so if you're here to speak about that, you can speak during this time as well. I will call the people up in order here on the list, and then we'll go to the people online. Again, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. There are 3 lights on the clerk's desk there. As long as the light is green, you have plenty of time to speak. When it starts blinking, you have about a minute. When it gets to yellow, you have about 30 seconds to start wrapping it up. When it gets to red, please go ahead and wrap up your comments. It does get a little awkward if I have to stop you. So we will go ahead and call up the first person here, Charlie Myers and Guy Namiash on deck.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words. And my name is Charlie Myers. I reside at 3620 Otis Street in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, District 1. And you probably noticed a number of folks out there wearing buttons tonight saying Wheat Ridge welcomes immigrants. It's just to let you know we're still here, still concerned about the safety of our neighbors. I would just like to follow up on the February 23rd City Council meeting. Resident of District 2, Gary Holmes, suggested specific requirements be added to the City Council's Human Dignity and Civil Rights Resolution in order to protect our neighbors. By the way, we feel it's an excellent resolution, but it does seem that more now than ever needs to be, we need to have more added to it. Look, we continue to be worried about the safety of our neighbors. We understand that more ICE agents have been hired and scores of new SUVs have been delivered to the ICE facility in Centennial. So what does that all mean? Could we be looking at more ICE actions here in Wheat Ridge, along with taking them to the Aurora Detention Center? The statement, or the statements we've heard from those detained, they've been very compelling and actually hard to listen to, as they seem to be so grounded in cruelty. So here are 4 items that Gary Holmes mentioned, and I think he's out there, that we would like to see the City of Wheat Ridge City Council adopt. Number 1, prohibiting Wheat Ridge Police from entering into arrangements with ICE, prohibiting Wheat Ridge Police from collateral support for ICE operations in the City of Wheat Ridge. Number 3, insisting that immigration enforcement in Wheat Ridge be made using judicial warrants rather than using civil detainers. And 4, requiring ICE agents to be unmasked and identifiable. There are many municipalities across the state and different organizations that could be of help in this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Guy Namiash up and Morgan Richards on deck.
Good evening, Council. Guy Namiash, Nahmiach, 3650 Ward Road. First of all, thank you for moving that decision to, so you have more time to study it, that $100,000 decision. This weekend, we had the best Ridge Fest we've ever had. That was so much fun. And being the owner of the Neighborhood Gazette, we have a booth that has a banner that says, "I will talk to anyone about anything." Let me tell you, they come out. I had people want to talk to me about quantum physics, old-time restaurants that used to be here in Wheat Ridge, the electoral map. There was a city councilor from Aurora that came and spoke to us about how amazing Wheat Ridge is. She met so many people and a lot of the vendors. We had somebody talk to us about the lack of diverse food options. talk to us about rigged elections. I had a young lady talk to me about Dan Larson's poem that we published. She talked to me and talked to me. Turns out it was Dan's wife. We had somebody talk to, actually a number of people talk to us about the lack of lighting on 44th Avenue, just general lighting. The need for farmers markets. The lack of bike safety on 29th. And I know 29th is not our bike path, but it is Denver's, and they just cross over Sheridan and continue. We had somebody talk to us about the terrible Christmas tree lighting ceremony that we had. I had a young man talk to me about I think it was the first time that he told anybody that he was gay, and that was pretty amazing. And then he followed up about difficulty of being a gay Republican, but felt so welcome here in Wheat Ridge. A bunch of people talked to me about the no need for any more libraries because most people go to the one on 20th. And best Ridge Fest ever. Nobody actually complained about being marginalized or not getting services from the city. I love that we have the IDEA committee. It seems to be very narrow-minded. I don't know if they're still here, but I'm the Jewish guy that everybody knows. So when there's a giant swastika outside of our city, that IDEA committee was silent. That's who I was waiting for to say something. Silent. And, it's not so much the city, but you guys built the IDEA committee to actually do that. Never, ever heard anything from the IDEA committee. Super disappointed. $100,000. Am I finished now? Yeah. Great. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We tend not to allow applause other than the proclamations. Appreciate it, though. Morgan Richards is up, and then we'll go to our callers online.
Hello, I'm Morgan Richards at 3255 Ames Street, RICHARDS. And I'm a parent, a small business owner, live and work in Wheat Ridge. And I'm here to thank you. Because since 2020, our city and you as leaders have leaned into making sure that our community is safe and inclusive for everyone, which includes myself, who come from Jewish people, my 2 children who are Black, one of who is on the autism spectrum. It is so important for us to continue to do the work that we committed to in 2020 to ensure that people feel safe and welcome. And there are economic realities, benefits, as well as liabilities in doing that, which is why I came tonight to say, please go ahead and move forward with the audit, which you committed to by consensus in January. An audit will give us factual information about the areas that we need to improve, because frankly, look at us. Most of us have a dominant cultural lived experience on the street. I don't experience the things my children do. I don't experience what Alexis does. I don't live in their skins, but I know enough that we have more work to do, and the audit will help inform that work in a way that can be cost effective. And frankly, if we don't do that work, we run the risk of there being very serious harm against somebody that could be very expensive and a liability for the city. So it's an investment in making our community better. So I really thank all of you. Please continue to be brave and do the right thing, because not everybody even feels safe enough to show up here tonight to speak to this. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to our callers online. I apologize if I messed this name up, but Kalichi Ndukwe Ajala. No. Leah Dosman. Neither one of them are online, or? No? Okay. All right. Well, it doesn't sound like we have anybody online to speak at the moment, so we will go ahead and go to agenda item number 1, our consent agenda. Councilor Martell, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce our consent agenda item 1B, resolution number 28-2026. A resolution amending the 2026 fiscal year general fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $50,000 for the purpose of accepting a grant from Colorado Gives Foundation. At issue, in May 2026, Colorado Gives Foundation awarded the Wheat Ridge Homeless Navigation Program $50,000 to be used for unrestricted operational support through December 31st, 2027.
Thank you. This is our consent agenda, so Councilor Martell, may I please have a motion?
Yes, I move to approve the consent agenda item.
Do we have a second? Second by Councilor Snell. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Eight ayes, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Going on to agenda item number 2, Mayor Pro Tem Holteen, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce Council Bill Number 7, 2026, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Municipal Code concerning animal welfare and regulations for the same. At issue, several sections of the city's animal code are outdated, inconsistent, confusing, or do not reflect current needs or practices. As such, staff proposes several amendments to the Wheat Ridge Animal and Land Use Code for the City Council's consideration.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing, and Mr. Goff, do we have a presentation?
We do. A little bit of history here. So Mary Ann Schilling, our deputy city manager, is going to, she has a presentation this evening to remind everybody where we came from. Mary Ann.
Great, thank you. So we'll start with a little bit of background and just do a quick run through of the prior action, and then I'm going to go through step by step all of the updates to Chapter 2, Chapter 4, and Chapter 26 that we are proposing this evening. So as a background, as was mentioned, we realized that Chapter 4 of the city code was a little outdated, and so when we realized some sections were outdated, we decided to go through and do a haul of all of Chapter 4, which is our animals chapter. So tonight we are presenting Council Bill Number 7, 2026, which makes changes to the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws in Chapter 2, Administration, Chapter 4, Animals, and Chapter 26, I should say 26, I apologize, Zoning and Development. So how we got here, we started this a little over a year ago as a study session. We went through about 20 items with you all. I think we got consensus on about 2/3, 3/4 of the items. We went back, did some additional research, came back with some more information for you all, and then added roosters to the agenda. From that information, the sections related to Chapter 26 were taken to the Planning Commission in February of this year. We combined all of the updates to an ordinance on first reading in March, continued the second hearing in April, came back in May of this year, and so now we are back again with second reading. I'm going to go through each section one by one with you all for the proposed amendments. First is administration in section 2 of chapter 2. This is adding chapter 4 to the inclusion of the administration section, because as we move forward, there's a section related to guard dogs, cease and desist orders that now involves an administrative hearing. We'll now move into chapter 4. We have several items on that. Section 4.1, vicious animal, dangerous dog, and aggressive animal definitions. Currently, the animal code includes separate definitions for vicious animal, aggressive dogs, and dangerous dogs. This amendment would now consolidate these categories into aggressive animals and dangerous animals to improve clarity and ensure consistent treatment across different animal species. This next section is animals at large. Currently, the animals at large provision only applies to dogs. This amendment would update those regulations to include all animals, and it would clarify that animals remaining on their owner's property are not considered at large. And you may remember that in May 11th, we discussed this specifically, and that We were originally going to include an exemption for domestic cats, and City Council provided consensus to remove that exemption, so the proposed ordinance does not have that exemption. Next section is off-leash dog park regulations. Currently, violations of off-leash dog park regulations are treated as criminal offenses. This amendment deletes that relevant clause in Chapter 4, allowing such violations to be addressed solely as civil offenses. The reason for this is that we feel that in the other areas of Chapter 4, they sufficiently address all criminal offenses and they're not needed to be specifically off-leash dog related. Additionally, this amendment provides clarity to allow off-leash dog regulations to now live in Chapter 17, Parks and Recreation. Section 4.10 is owners required to report bites. Currently, the city does not require animal owners to report bites when the animal bites a person and breaks the skin. This amendment would require that when there is a breaking of a skin, it would be reported to a city community service officer within 48 hours, which aligns with best practices with rabies control. Next section here, rabies quarantine vaccinations. This is a bit of a housekeeping item. Animals that bite a person are already required to be placed under quarantine for 10 days to monitor for signs of rabies. However, the code does not currently prohibit an owner from obtaining a rabies vaccination for an animal during the quarantine period. This amendment would establish that prohibition, as a vaccination during quarantine could interfere with the rabies evaluation process. Rabies outbreak powers. Currently, in the event of a rabies outbreak, Mayor Stites is authorized to impose the regulations on animals within city limits. We have never had to exercise this practice. However, in moving forward, we recommend that we remove that provision so that any emergency declarations or regulatory actions related to rabies would instead follow the city's standard health and safety emergency procedures, which defer instead to the county public health officials. Unsafe transportation of animals. The code is amended to define transporting an animal in a motor vehicle or trailer without appropriate safety restraints sufficient to prevent the animal from falling or jumping from a moving vehicle in a public place as a form of animal cruelty. The next section. Currently, the code does not explicitly prohibit leaving animals unattended in vehicles without adequate ventilation or in extreme temperatures. And although city law enforcement may address such situations under state law, this amendment establishes that this conduct as a form of animal cruelty under the city's code, and authorizes law enforcement to immediately enter and inspect the vehicle to rescue an endangered animal. Moving to section 4.14, reptiles, amphibians, insects in the city of Wheat Ridge. Currently, section 4.414D prohibits the keeping of amphibians, reptiles, and insects. This amendment revises the section to allow the keeping of such animals under specified conditions. And during the May 11 study session, City Council also provided consensus to replace the word insects with invertebrates and to simplify the city code to align with the state statutes. Section 4.14, endangered species. The code currently prohibits the ownership of exotic or wild animals. This amendment allows endangered or threatened species under state, federal, and international law to be kept within the city, provided that they are cared for by a properly licensed entity. 4.14, chief's exemption process. The chief may grant exemptions to exotic wild animal provisions on a 12-month basis. This amendment clarifies the expectation and procedures for this process and authorizes the chief to 1, approve, 2, approve with conditions, or 3, deny exemption requests. Next is swine in the city of Wheat Ridge. Swine are currently permitted in the city under both the Animal Code and the Land Use Code. This amendment revises the Animal Code to prohibit the keeping of swine. There is also a separate ordinance addressing swine regulations in Chapter 26 of the Land Use Code, which I'll discuss later. And during the May 11th special study session, City Council also provided consensus to remove the Latin language descriptors and use plain language instead, and you'll see that in the proposed amendment. 4.17, dangerous animal defenses. We have a section in the code which details affirmative defenses available to dangerous dogs, such as the dog was provoked or defending their owner. These were expanded to apply to all animals, not just dogs. Child-proof structures for dangerous dogs. A presiding judge of the city municipal court may allow a dog that meets the definition of a dangerous animal to be kept in the city, provided that the dog is maintained in a secured enclosure. And this amendment clarifies that these enclosures must be childproof. Transfer of dangerous dogs. Currently, a dog meeting the definition of a dangerous animal may be transferred only to a family member, but sometimes that's not the best option for a dog. This amendment revises the code to allow transfers solely to responsible caretakers as evaluated by the city's community service officers, regardless of the relationship between the transferring parties. Next, we have the possession of dangerous and aggressive dogs. Currently, the code allows dogs meeting the definition of a dangerous or aggressive animal to be kept within the city, provided that the owner complies with the certain conditions specified by the presiding judge of the city's municipal court. This amendment clarifies that the section to be more straightforward, easier to understand without making any substantive changes. Licensing authority. This code was amended to authorize staff to establish approved licensing administrators. The code previously required a mile-high rabies tag, which used to exist at one time but no longer is in use. So this replaces it with broader language regard to licensing. In this next section, child-proof structures for guard dogs. It was amended to require that enclosures for all guard dogs are childproof. Section 4.33, guard dog cease and desist orders. This is a new section which authorizes the city's law enforcement to issue a cease and desist order to an entity using a guard dog when such use poses a danger to the public. Any such order would be subject to the administrative hearing appeals process. Section 4.34, kennel licenses. The city currently issues kennel licenses. This amendment establishes that as a condition of the license, the city's law enforcement may inspect the facility at any time, and that if there is a reasonable cause to suspect danger to an animal. Section 4.52, hearings required for the disposal of animals. Current practice at the city and at the Foothills Animal Shelter is that no animal shall be sold, donated, or euthanized without a signed order from the judge, except in cases where an animal is ill, severely injured, or experiencing extreme pain. This amendment officially codifies that existing practice. 4.52, court-ordered animal holds. The code establishes that the municipal court is authorized to place a hold on animals suspected of neglect, seized due to cruelty, designated as dangerous or aggressive, or identified as service animals until the resolution of their case. While this has been the standard practice in the city of Wheat Ridge, the authority was previously inferred rather than explicitly granted to the judge for. And finally, we have Chapter 26, Zoning and Development. In Section 26.204, the zoning district use schedule. This amends the code by replacing the note of the table of uses, agricultural and public facilities to now prohibit the raising or keeping of swine in all zone districts. And in Chapter 26.206 of the code is now amended to establish limits on the number of roosters permitted per property. 1 rooster is allowed on the property under 1 acre, and up to 3 roosters are allowed on larger properties. This applies to residential and agricultural zone districts. This code in this section is also amended to prohibit the raising and keeping of swine in all zone districts. So with that, I move to recommend approval of Council Bill 07-2026, an ordinance amending the Code of Laws concerning animal welfare.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one point of clarification, and of course, it's about the swine. I just want to make sure I'm reading everything correctly. Sections 4-14 and sections 26-204 both use the language that swine are prohibited. And my understanding from our last conversation was that swines could still be subject to chief's approval or exemption. Would they be eligible?
Of the things that we are approving here for the recommended motion. I move to approve Council Bill Number 7, 2026, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning animal welfare and regulations for the same, and that it takes
Patience with us, and I think we got to a really good place. And thanks for all your work.
Thank you. Counselor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think this is a very good example of how members of welfare, both within this, and I appreciate all the work. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Wood.
This is really a little duplicative, but it's important to me to say to you, thank you for all the hard.
So he did come home at 5 in the morning, like 5 in the morning, like a teenager coming home from prom. A teenager coming home from prom, sneaking in, and slept all day. I'm sneaking in and slept all day. But I woke him up like my dad would have woke.
really my first insight into part of Wheat Ridge that I just didn't necessarily experience day to day, going to restaurants and the grocery store. And so I had a deep familiarity with our animal code, long herd of rabbits and cats. But not only did we go through two councils, we may and cats, but not only did we go through two councils, we may have scared away Cole. On this. But in your but in your presentation tonight, Marianne, just like the depth and complexity that
highlight really quickly the compassion that our council put into this decision. I saw that in many times through discussions, through study sessions, and I really want to call that out because you can't ever have too much compassion. And just like Mayor Pro Tem Holteen just said, for both our community members, but also our animal community members. So I'm grateful to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, will the clerk please poll the council?
Eight ayes, no nays, motion carries.
And our compliments to staff on their hard work on this. Thank you. Moving to agenda item number 3. Counselor Snell, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. This is Council Bill number 11-2026, an ordinance reappointing Jonathan Lucero as presiding municipal court judge and approving a municipal judge services agreement. At issue, the city's home rule charter provides for appointment of the municipal court judge for a term of 2 years. The current term of presiding Judge Jonathan Lucero expires July 1st, 2026.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on first reading to set the date and time for a public hearing. So we'll have no public comment or any presentation tonight. So Counselor Snell, may I please have a motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve Council Bill number 11-2026, an ordinance reappointing Jonathan Lucero as presiding municipal court judge and approving a municipal judge services agreement on first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, June 22nd, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. as a virtual meeting and in City Council Chambers, 7500 West 29th Avenue, and that it takes effect upon adoption at second reading.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
I have a second by Counselor Quinn. Will the clerk please poll the council?
8 ayes, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 4. Counselor Larson, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's item number 4 is an ordinance on first reading. Council Bill number 12-2026, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to transfer the duties of the Board of Adjustment to the Planning Commission. The item under consideration is to amend Chapter 2 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to transfer the duties of the Board of Adjustment to the Planning Commission.
Thank you. This is also an ordinance on first reading to set the date and time for a future public hearing. Counselor Larson, may I please have a motion?
I move to approve Council Bill number 12-2026, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to transfer the duties of the Board of Adjustment to the Planning Commission on first reading, ordered published, a public hearing set for Monday, July 13, 2026, at 6:30 PM as a virtual meeting and in City Council chambers, and that it takes effect immediately after final publication.
Second.
I have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Holteen. Will the clerk please poll the council?
8 ayes, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 5. Councilor Okada, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Introducing Council Bill number 13-2026, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning disposition of lost, abandoned, and unclaimed property. At issue, the Colorado Revised Uniform Unclaimed Property Act generally requires holders of unclaimed property, such as the city, to disperse unclaimed cash and cash instruments to the state treasurer. The act had allowed local government to exempt itself from the act if it had adopted a local ordinance concerning unclaimed property, which the city did in February 2025. However, on June 4th, 2025, Governor Polis signed House Bill 25-1224, which removed this exemption from the act. This ordinance revises code sections to comply with the act as amended on June 4th, 2025, and simplifies the procedure for the city's disposition of unclaimed property.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on first reading to set the date and time and location for a public hearing. Councilor Okada, may I please have a motion?
I move to approve Council Bill number 13-2026, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning disposition of lost, abandoned, and unclaimed property on first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, June 22nd, 2026, at 6:30 PM as a virtual meeting and in City Council chambers, and that it takes effect 15 days after final publication as provided by the Charter.
Second.
I have a second by Councilor Ohm. Will the clerk please poll the council?
8 ayes, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 6. Councilor Wood, will you please introduce this item?
Yes, agenda item number 6. The title of this agenda, or of this item, is a motion awarding a contract to Roxall Consulting Group Incorporated in the amount of $427,536.19 with a contingency amount of $42,753.62 for a total approved amount of $289,081.81 for the Wadsworth Path Reconstruction Management Services contract. The issue before us is that the city entered into an IGA with CDOT to construct a shared use path along Wadsworth Boulevard between 32nd Avenue and 35th Avenue. The IGA allows for reimbursement of design, construction, and construction management services. Staff issued a request for qualifications for construction management services per CDOT guidelines and received 2 responses. Based on the information provided and past work experience, staff determined Roxall to be the most qualified firm to provide construction management services for the project. The city is recommending to enter into a contract with Roxall.
Thank you. This is a motion before the council. Mr. Goff, do we have a presentation?
Kent Kisselman, our Public Works Director, will add a little bit more detail. Thanks, Kent.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this evening. Yes, this is going to be our next Wadsworth project from 32nd to 35th. Have a detached sidewalk, add some lighting, bus pad, and mill and overlay the roadway section there. What we've already done is you have approved the IGA with CDOT back in 2023. We've approved the Olson contract for design in 2024. And in March, we approved the Jalisco to be the contractor. So we realized that we could get reimbursed for the construction management services. So we reached out to CDOT, put out the RFQ, and we can get reimbursed up to 86.5% of these services. So we did the RFQ, and Roxall is our selection. With that, we would recommend a contract to Roxall Consulting in the amount of $470,289.81, and that includes the 10% contingency.
And Mayor, just a reminder, the city did receive a $7.5 million grant from the Dr. Cog Transportation Improvement Program for this project. The city's match is $1 million, so quite a bit of outside funds helping complete this project.
Thank you. We'll go to questions from council. Councilor Quinn.
Mr. Goff, does that, with those figures you just said, it sounds like we're roughly getting this project done for $500,000-ish, correct? Once all the grants and everything come forth?
Yeah, it's in your staff memo, there was quite a bit of right-of-way design environmental work that was needed. That was just over $1 million, or the right-of-way acquisition was about 1.5 million. We estimated the design was 1 million, construction about 4.4, and then this contract this evening for construction management. So it's within the 7.5 million grant award, so under budget and on schedule.
Perfect.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Forgive me if I missed this, but are we looking at sidewalk construction on both sides of Wadsworth?
Only the west side.
The left side?
West.
Oh, west side,
West.
depending which way you're going, left or right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, so.
The west side.
From 32nd to 35th, the corner of the gas station.
Okay.
And if you'll recall, just briefly, this was part of, there was an intersection design to be redesigned by CDOT, and that was to be part of this construction. But we decoupled that because CDOT was doing the design, and they're still doing the design. So we would still be waiting, and we would be getting marks against us from Dr. Cog for not being ready to go. So we're ready to go, and with this approval this evening, we have all our ducks in a row, and we're ready to begin construction.
And the right-of-way has been acquired?
It has. I think we have one property left, and I think I saw that come through today, and so they'll be setting a closing on that, and that will be the last one.
Well, that is encouraging. Then, what's your the latest timeline then on construction?
After approval this evening, we'll have a pre-construction meeting with Holisco and see when they'll be able to get ready to go, but there is some ditch work that needs to be done, and that can't take place now until October. But we have plenty of opportunity to begin in July, and then, complete the road work, the sidewalk, buffer, mill and overlay, and then look for that ditch work in October when the ditch is shut down.
And completion by?
We would hope to complete this project by the end of the year.
I'm sorry, by the?
End of this year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem Holte.
Thank you. Does this, the intersection at 35th and Wadsworth, how, has that been treated at all through the Wadsworth 1 project, or is that getting improved? Like, the path starts at 35th, but I just want to make sure that that road crossing is safe for bikes and pedestrians. Like, when we've got good paths but not good crossings, it can be a little challenging.
This project includes the ADA ramp at the corner of 35th and Wads on the, I guess it'd be the northwest corner. And all the other corners and the intersection is all part of the CDOT's project that they're still in design with.
That's at 32nd, but at 35th, there's a crosswalk and stop bar and signage.
Our project stops at 35th on the west side. I mean, internally, I guess we can look at, updating the crossbar, the stop bar, if that's necessary. But again, our project goes from 32nd to 35th and no further than that.
Right, yeah, I'm just trying to clarify, like, 35th, where does 35th start or stop? Because we've been doing 35th on either side, and I just want to make sure we're not ignoring the roadway.
All the way to the northwest corner of 35th and Wads, so through the interchange.
Okay, all right, that's just what I want to make sure. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, Councilor Wood, may I have a motion, please?
Yes, I move to award a contract to Roxall Consulting Group Incorporated in the amount of $427,536.19 with a contingency amount of $42,753.62 for a total approved amount of $470,289.81 for the Wadsworth Path project.
Second.
I have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Holteen. Do we have discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
8 ayes, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7. Counselor Ohm, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration of written findings and decision for the Lakeside Auto Wash special use permit. At issue, City Council conducted a public hearing to review the special use permit for Lakeside Auto Wash, which is located at 5900 West 44th Avenue. Following the hearing, the council voted to add conditions of approval and further directed the city attorney to prepare written findings and decision.
Thank you. This is a motion for the council. It is not quasi-judicial. I'm going to go ahead and recognize the city attorney real quick to let us know what's going on.
Thank you very much. If I can handle one procedural matter before we get to the substance of the findings and decision themselves. As council is aware, the charter at section 5.9 requires council members to vote on everything unless they're excused by unanimous consent of the remaining members. And you will recall that at the beginning of, or actually before the hearing was opened on this matter on May the 18th, my partner Thad Renault, who was sitting in for me that night, engaged in some Q&A to respond to a couple of requests for council members to recuse themselves. He went through a Q&A with Councilmember Ohm, who was not recused, but he did go. We established that Councilmember Holteen would need to excuse herself, and of course that can only be at the consent of the other council members. And during that meeting, the other council members did in fact vote to unanimously to excuse Councilmember Holteen. The purpose of me going through this exercise is to remind us of that and to make a little record that the council did in fact excuse Councilmember Holteen. And I would ask the council to confirm by a consensus that your action on May 18th excusing Councilmember Holteen extends to tonight and your action on reviewing and acting on these findings. So if I can get a head nod from all council members, if there's put it this way, if there's a council member who disagrees with continuing to excuse Councilmember Holteen, if you would so indicate. Terrific. Let the record reflect that no council member raised their hand. Therefore, all council members have agreed that your action in excusing Councilmember Holteen on May 18th continues to tonight and extends to the action you're about to take here. With that in mind, we can excuse Councilmember Holteen, and we'll send someone to come get her when this item is concluded. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl.
Yeah.
I think I misspoke. This is quasi-judicial. Sorry about that. Mr. Goff, do we have a further presentation on this item?
Yeah, we'll turn it back to Mr. Dahl.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Council, very quickly, you conducted a hearing on May 18th on, as you were permitted to do and after notice, on the auto wash special use permit. You took testimony and evidence. And after taking all that testimony, closing the hearing, you deliberated and you took a motion to modify the special use permit and to direct my office to prepare findings and decision memorializing your decision. I have prepared those findings and they're in your packet. In so doing, I reviewed the entire recording of your hearing. I also conferred with my partner Thad Renault, who was sitting in for me that evening, and staff. And the resulting findings and decision that you have in front of you are reflective of not only my research, but my conferring with those individuals. I believe it's as accurate as I possibly can make it in terms of reflecting not only the evidence that was presented, but the dialogue and the discussion of council. With that in mind, you have the hearings and you have the findings in front of you. There's not really, no additional testimony is permitted. You've closed the hearing. So really, this is just action on these findings. If there's a concern with the findings and you have questions for me about any aspect of them, I'm happy to take those questions. In the end, there's a motion, the recommended motion is to approve the findings as presented. But with that, I'm happy to take any questions before you would take action.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Do we have any questions from council? Seeing none. Counselor Ohm, will you please make a motion?
I move to approve the written findings and decision for the Lakeside Auto Wash special use permit as prepared by the city attorney.
I have a motion by Counselor Ohm and a second by Counselor Okada. Do we have discussion on the motion? Counselor Quinn. Okay. Counselor Larson.
And thank you, Mayor. And I would just like to say that I think it was pretty clear from the evidence that we heard at the hearing last month that this was a fairly clear example of noncompliance, both due to noise and the operational impacts on the neighbors. So I support this motion and the decision behind it.
Thank you. Any other? Counselor Quinn again.
Yeah, sorry, I'd support this and agree with you, Counselor Larson, that, you know, we don't live next to that. Those folks that came and testified did, and I just want to make sure that we take care of those folks as best we can. I feel bad for the business, but like I said, I don't live next door to that, and I don't believe I could. So appreciate all the work and everything that went into this.
Thank you. Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to definitely thank staff, our city attorney, and everybody that was involved with us to get to this point. Appreciate all the detail and really, you know, council taking a real hard look at this and you know, coming up to the decision we made. Thank you.
Any other discussion before we? Okay. Will the clerk please poll the council?
7 ayes, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Will somebody grab Mayor Pro Tem Holteen? And we will go ahead and go to city managers matters.
Nothing this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. City attorneys matters.
Well, thank you again for allowing me to be absent as I needed to be last meeting. And I appreciate your taken care of or being taken care of by my partner, Thad Renault. He reports that you're a great group and he enjoyed working with you and being in the hearing.
We enjoyed getting to meet Thad and working with him as well. Thank you for having
That's all I have. Thank you.
Elected officials matters. We will start with District 3 today. Councilor Wood, how are you?
My report really has to do with Ridge Fest, which I attended on Saturday. It was I'm almost ashamed to say, my first Ridge Fest. I was so wholly impressed. It was so well attended. It was a tough day in the sense that it was hot weather, a little difficult to be out there in the sun. The shade was fine, but everything was thought of. There were cooling pools for the dogs, so people didn't hesitate to bring them to Ridge Fest, and I thought it was wonderful and a great amenity for residents of Wheat Ridge, and they clearly thought the same. So thanks to Paige and to Local Works for putting that on because it was wonderful.
Thank you. Councilor Quinn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I had the privilege of attending the Tabor Lake ribbon cutting. Mayor Pro Tem Holteen did a great job with the scissors. But yeah, you know, I'm just trying to build you up a little bit. But it was a great time. There were some of the students from School of Mines that did some of the original design showed up there. To say a few words, and of course, the construction company that did it, and it was really good. The aerators for the pond is kind of really cool because I helped get the electric over to it, and Excel through my manager helped rebuild the entire system from where that ends on Tabor there all the way to 44th. Because I think it goes back to before any of us were born, into the 50s. And so hopefully those residents got a little extra perk with some new transformers and some current electric infrastructure there. But it was a great time. If anyone hasn't gone to that Tabor Lake Trail, it's really cool. It's going to be neat I think we had hawks flying over or something while we were there. It was, and I have seen an eagle there once or twice, so it was a good time. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Martell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to second both Councilmember Woods and Councilmember Quinn. I also participated in the Tabor Lake ribbon cutting and attended Ridge Fest last weekend, and they were both lovely. I'd like to congratulate Local Works on another great event. They do so much for our community, and most of the time when I'm talking about Local Works, it's also about the Makerspace. So I'd like to shout out Paige and her crew for a really good Ridge Fest. I'd also like to acknowledge our proclamations this month, and I think District 1 resident Alexis made a really great point about Pride is a celebration, but there's also work to do. And I think that was also resonated by Kia, who talked about that there is still work to do. And I really appreciate our council's willingness to do all the work that is in front of us. And I also am excited for this weekend at the Green on 38th is Wheat Ridge Pride. And there will be a pet parade and a potluck and a Pride concert. And I'm very proud to live in a community where we're actually having a really fun community celebration around this event. And I think that's all I got. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few things. Last Wednesday, I attended the ADA Transition Plan Open House that was at the Active Adult Center. And fantastic job by our team. And then I got to chat with a lot of them, and then also some of the consultants from Matrix Design Group who are helping and working with the city on this ADA transition plan. And this is it's a big step for us, and I think that it's time to do this. Obviously, it's past time for some of our facilities, but I think we're approaching it in a great way. I saw a lot of great engagement with the community, and I heard a lot of great discussions. And there was opportunity for folks to be able to come up to a map or a list of things and write their own comments in. So really, really great way to take feedback and build that into the plan. And if you didn't make it, you can still take the survey. It's open for some time still. If you go to What's Up Wheat Ridge, you'll just click on ADA transition plan, and you can take the survey and provide any feedback. But this is something that will make our community more accessible to differently abled folks and folks in wheelchairs. And it was really eye-opening to go through that entire survey and talk with folks. So it's really important to consider how everyone kind of moves through our community and experiences it. So excellent job, and thank you for having that. I also want to mention a few things about our proclamation tonight, especially our Pride Proclamation. I'd like to formally wish everyone a happy Pride. I'd like to send sincere thanks to Dr. Alexis for accepting our proclamation and for her brave words. I wrote something because I'm not great off the cuff all the time, so I just want to share with you. I'd be remiss if I didn't take a minute to share some thoughts on Pride Month and to answer that oft asked, albeit unnecessary question, why do you need a whole month? Or many of the more unkind, nasty comments that folks seem to make only behind the safety of a keyboard. Pride exists because LGBTQ plus people have had to fight for the right to live openly, love freely, and live without fear. It began as an act of resistance, a refusal to be invisible, and that necessity has not disappeared. In many places right now, Pride is still the only space where queer people can see themselves fully reflected and celebrated. Pride is especially important when it comes to queer youth. Every young person deserves to feel safe in their school, their neighborhood, their home, and their own skin. For many LGBTQ plus youth, that safety is conditional or absent entirely. They learn to monitor how they speak, how they dress, who they mention, what they reveal. That constant vigilance is exhausting, and it has real consequences for mental health and well-being. Queer kids are more than 4 times more likely to attempt suicide or self-harm as their straight peers, and those numbers are even higher when it comes to trans youth. Feeling safe shouldn't be something that you have to earn. Feeling safe from harm, from public shame, from bullies. Our world today is so quick to judge, to find fault, and to hate because of differences. I'm pleased that we're taking steps in Wheat Ridge to ensure that everyone feels safe, supported, and celebrated, and I'm grateful for the allies that exist in our community and on this council. And yet there's work still to be done. Thanks for listening.
Councilor Okada.
Thank you, Mayor. Wanted to thank the residents that came out. Dan and I last Thursday had a neighborhood meeting for the Garrison Street neighborhood, so that they could meet with us, but also with the developers that are planning on doing some stuff with those lots that are out there. I thought that was a really good example of a neighborhood coming together to speak their voice and be strong, and insistent in the right way about an outcome that they were really hopeful for. So we're still miles away from an outcome, but I feel like that's worth acknowledging. Thank you to all the neighbors that came out to that and had such positive interactions, and also thank you for the developer for being willing to and enthusiastic about coming out and speaking with us and answering our questions there too. Also want to talk about Ridge Fest. Ridge Fest was excellent. There was I don't know how much else I can say, but I did have a Euro burger, and Euro being the Greek spit meat. That was an amazing and wonderful experience. So thank you guys for being there. Dan and I also went to Arvada's festival that was happening that same day because I just outed us. We went out to the Arvada Festival that same day so we could talk about, so we could learn a little bit about some of the developments that were happening on the north side of Wheat Ridge that were kind of right next to my neighborhood, and learned some very interesting things that are happening there too. Not that it's a contest, but I feel like ours was maybe a touch better and maybe a touch better attended. But the other thing I wanted to mention here is I want to kind of acknowledge Councilmember Quinn and just point out that a council that's as resonant and has so much agreeability amongst us. I feel like anytime we have a moment where we get a chance to be able to show dissent and disagreement on some of the things that we think and talk about, especially here on the dais when we have plenty of disagreements behind the scenes, I think that's something that should be deeply acknowledged and applauded. So I just wanted to say thank you, Councilmember Quinn, for that. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
And thank you, Mayor. First off, I want everybody to know that today is National Best Friends Day. So call, text, or write your best friend. In fact, there was a poem published in the Neighborhood Gazette this last week. I'll spare you all and will not read it. On Thursday, members of the council and myself attended the quarterly Jefferson County Commissioners and Municipals meeting, and the topic this go around was wildfire mitigation and the Jefferson County program that is up and running now. That is really taking on the issue of wildfire mitigation along the Front Range here, and they've got a fairly solid plan that's up and running now. There was also discussion about water restrictions at the meeting, and I think we heard the other day that we're now officially in a water emergency. We'll find out more about what that means in the coming weeks. I did that same day have the opportunity to attend the Tabor Lake ribbon cutting, and congratulations to Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen for doing a wonderful job there emceeing that event. And I learned about aeration equipment that is installed in there, and it's going to help prevent the sort of algae blooms and some of the bad things that happen when you have stagnant water, and this is going to go a long way to preventing that and keeping that water fresh. And then Finally, I was able to attend Ridge Fest, and as Councilmember Okada alluded to, we were able to attend a competitive fest on the same day, and it's not even in the same league. But I did, the thought occurred to me as I was kind of walking around the green on 38th, is that the event on Saturday, Ridge Fest, is exactly how that space was designed, with the curved walkways, with the access to electricity for the booths, with a lot of the small touches that went in there that make this probably one of the best outdoor facilities in the whole metro area. I really can't say enough for all of the work that went into designing and executing on this really solid idea for what a modern civic gathering place should be. That is all I have for tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Did anybody else picture like a 1980s sitcom with these two wandering around Arvada, like stealing mascots and wearing Arvada Reds stuff? Yeah. Good for you guys. All right, Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I also attended the Jeffco quarterly meeting, and City of Lakewood was the host. They did a great job. Fire and water, two things that I definitely have a huge interest in, and it's really great to have that understanding in our community and in a county that we all share things. I mean, we may not have all the evergreen trees as some of our neighbors, but we're all affected by wildfire, and so just trying to come together and have that understanding, it was great. They did a great job of doing that. And then the Ridge Fest, I got there a little bit later. It was very, very hot, and so those people that volunteered, Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen, thank you. It was very warm, but I will say that there were so many people out there. It wasn't quite elbow to elbow. It was comfortable, but you could tell it was alive. There was so much energy. The music that came out from that band, it was the right volume. I didn't hear any complaints from any of my constituents or neighbors, nothing negative. And I thought everybody got along very well, and just the way everything, it was lined out with all the tents on the side. It was a good mix. And I stayed there when they wrapped up at 8 o'clock. It was 8 o'clock, things were wrapped up. They had, staff was out there cleaning up every little piece of trash. I thought they did an excellent job, so big thank you to that. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen.
Well, when you're second to last, most of your things are spoken about, but so yes, Ridge Fest was amazing. I volunteered both at the liquor ticket sales as well as then did some time at the Wheat Ridge Active Transportation Advisory tent, and I went home and I didn't even have a voice because I was talking to so many people about so many interesting things a lot of people hadn't seen in a while, but more wonderfully than all the people I saw that I knew were all the new people that I had never seen before. I just really feel like the green is working its magic. And there was a moment, Patrick stopped by the tent, we were just kind of stood back and looked and we're like, yeah, this is what we wanted to happen here. And there was a lot of community input and council deliberation around elements of it, and I feel like we really got it right. And everyone had a place, and it just flowed really well. So I'm looking forward to continued gatherings on the green this year and moving forward. Contrary to compliments I've heard tonight, I was not great with the scissors at the ribbon cutting at the Tabor Trail. I'm a little too short and they're not that sharp, but that didn't matter because it was just such a great event. We had so many of my colleagues here, city partners. My comments really focused on how many different people touched this project, and really I give a lot of credit to Mother Nature for making it worth all that investment. So it was a really beautiful morning, and it was really an honor to be part of it. I also was at the Jeffco quarterly meeting and got to talk about all the things that are coming down in Wheat Ridge, so new exciting things can come up, and I think that's really a point in time we're celebrating in our community. My two other things, I do want to, I feel like the theme tonight is speaking out on behalf of those who are most vulnerable and can't speak for themselves between our animal welfare and Juneteenth and LGBTQ Pride Month. We have a lot of entities, creatures, humans, neighbors living in our community who really need proactive support and policies, and for us to be vigilant and to stay focused and committed to our own city's vision and mission, which clearly states that it's important to us to do that work. So I'm really grateful for everyone who came out tonight to share their experiences around that, and especially the group who reminded us about every day in our community there are immigrants who feel like they don't have the same access to the quality of life and community experience that we all have. So I appreciate that. The last thing I just want to make mention of, just so it's a little bit more out front and clear. So Mayor Stites and I have been really trying to focus in on the proclamations in a way to make sure that they're relevant and not performative. I think that there's been, you share today is National This Day. There is a list of things every month and days that we could be recognizing and celebrating, and each year that list kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, and then is oftentimes drawn from national recognitions. And Mayor Stites and I really want to try and refocus that work towards our own community and recognize the things that we're doing here. And sometimes they may be national things that are particularly important and relevant, and we want to make sure we're doing that recognition, but we want to make sure we're doing that in partnership with our community. So when we have community members who come out and accept those proclamations, that's incredibly important. I think over the years, sometimes when we have those proclamations and we don't actually have someone from our community in the room to accept that, I think it makes us kind of pause a little bit and ask, how is this work showing up? The other piece of that is, as we will get to celebrate at our next meeting, is actually recognizing the work that's being done in our community. And so we are excited that we've got the first Mayor's Community Champion Award in 2 weeks. But I really invite all of you and any of the community partners, if there is good work that's happening in our community, let the mayor or myself know so that we can recognize them with a proclamation. It could be a youth sports team. It could be some volunteers who really made a difference. We really want to bring those people into our council chambers and recognize their importance in our civic life. So I'm tasking all of us to keep our ears and eyes open for those opportunities. And again, ping Patrick, Mayor Stites, or myself, and we'd love to work with you to draw up a proclamation. We're kind of focusing on the second meeting of the month to be that real community focus. So we'd love to recognize your neighbors who are doing exciting and interesting work. And with that, I am happy to hand it over to you.
Thank you. And I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Holteen for filling in for me last week. I believe that was my second meeting I've ever missed in 7 years, so I feel like I'm doing okay. But I do thank you for holding down the fort and cutting the ribbons and doing all the things. So thank you for doing all that. I was sad to miss the Tabor Lake Trail ribbon cutting, but I think you did a great job. And thanks for not putting anybody's eyes out with those scissors too. Those things are big. The Community Champion Award, we will have our first awardee coming up in our next meeting. I'm really excited about that. Please let your friends know, let all the community members know. There's an online form they can fill out to nominate people, and we'll be working to select people on a monthly basis to make sure that we're representing this community, because I think that there's a lot of good work going on in this community, and I'm excited for our first awardee. It's totally deserved, and at some point, who knows, we might name the award after this person, because it's so well deserved. But I also want to remind people, we have Coffee with the Mayor coming up this Saturday. It's going to be at Esther's, 9 a.m. So looking forward to seeing all of our community members for that. That's usually a very well-attended event. We'll have a very special one coming up in July, too, that Councilor Snell will be helping me out with as well. I had the opportunity over the last couple of weeks with several of our council members, Councilor Martell specifically, to step into the elementary schools, which I have the opportunity to go to several times a year, but to pass out the Future Farmers T-shirts to all the kindergartners that are graduating to first grade. And so cool. For those of you guys who were at Stober and all the other that we've done, it's one of the coolest things. And I believe 2038 is the graduating class that was on the back of that. So yeah, I see Mr. Dahl's head just exploded. So you'll still be here. I don't think anybody of the rest will be, but Jerry will still be here. So cool. And then I had the opportunity to go to Everett and be there for the 8th grade continuation. And as a former Everett, I was a Raider. These guys are Labradors, but I keep trying to get them to change their mascot. But nobody wants to be a dog. Anyway, but it was so cool to sit there with those 8th graders and their families and to hear the speeches and how well these kids spoke about their experience at that school. And the new principal there this year has really brought in a new energy and a passion that you can see. And we talk about pride tonight. And, you know, for a while, Everett was one of those schools that you kind of had to go to because it was in your neighborhood, but it wasn't one that you chose. But what I'm seeing in the schools that I go to now, people are choosing Everett because of that. And they're choosing Wheat Ridge High School because it's now a pathway that they can see themselves from elementary to middle to high school, and they can do it all here in Wheat Ridge, which is fantastic. So thank you to all the counselors. Thank you to the Wheat Ridge Coalition for putting that on and providing the t-shirts, and to all the schools for having us there. As Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Holteen said, we want to recognize what's going on, and I think that involves our schools as well. So a lot of great stuff going on there. And then Ridgefest. Ridgefest was absolutely amazing this weekend. I walked in a little late. I walked in about the same time Councilor Ohm did, and I was going to make a round all the way around the thing, and I got about 10 steps in and then just kind of had conversations at the same place for about 2 hours. And as Guy said, because I was standing next to him for several of the conversations he had, almost nothing but compliments about the green. I think somebody said they would like more shade, which I agree. But other than that, as the trees mature, I'm sure we'll get more shade. But it was an absolutely amazing event. Local Works, as usual, did a phenomenal job. I did think this was one of the best ones. I think they get better and better every year. But to see the local businesses out there, to see so many in the community out there, and as Mayor Pro Tem Holteen said, there were a couple times where we had to stop and go, I don't recognize a lot of the people that are here right now. And that's saying a lot because we know a lot of people on this dais here, and to see new community members coming in and join the space and bringing people together. And I had so many people come up and say, thank you for doing this. Thank you for building this here, because it's bringing people together. And, as Local Works is doing, they're working to program that and make sure that it's a success all summer long. So thank you to every single person for volunteering, putting in the work. Paige and her staff did an amazing job as always. So fantastic event. We look forward to more like that as we go through the summer. I know we have one coming up on July 2nd as well. That's going to be a pretty big event on the green there as well. So we have nothing else. Oh, one, I should mention that we had some amazing businesses there, and we have amazing businesses in Wheat Ridge. So as usual, if you can find it, you should find it and buy it in Wheat Ridge. We will go ahead and adjourn our meeting tonight, and we will go to a special study session. So we will take a 10-minute break. Counselors, please be in your seat at 8:15. Thank you. special study session for June 8th, 2026. We have one item on our agenda tonight, which is to discuss our 2026 polling results. We took public comment during our meeting, so we have nobody signed up to speak. So we will jump right in and go to City Manager Goff to give us our presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Stites. As you all know, we've been doing a lot of public engagement with our community over the last few years. We've adopted numerous planning documents after several years of planning efforts. And through this engagement and planning efforts, we've identified significant needs across infrastructure facilities and public spaces in Wheat Ridge. We took that information to a workshop on April 11th with you all and discussed what the priorities should be for the city for the next few years and how to potentially fund some of those large infrastructure needs. We did receive direction at that retreat or that workshop from City Council to poll our residents and get their opinions on what the priorities should be and how they would potentially support a funding ballot question potentially this November. So we used, contracted with Magellan Strategies. We have Ryan Winger here this evening, who you may recognize, or at least the council members that have been here for a bit. We've used Magellan for several different polling efforts. They do a lot of work across Colorado and have a very good track record, which we can talk about if you'd like. But with that, I just wanted to turn it over to Ryan. He has a presentation this evening on our first round of polling for this year. Ryan?
Thanks. Yeah, and thanks, as was mentioned. If you'll recall, if you're on council for 2024, we did a survey on that sales tax extension in 23 and then the Lutheran Legacy campus in 24. So I guess I'll say after taking 25 off, it's good to be back with you all this evening. And let's get right into it. The first thing we wanted to do, something like that. First thing we usually do, just kind of set the table for any kind of ballot measure, exploration, discussion, is to show a table like this. I know that just looks like maybe just a bunch of numbers and kind of makes it go cross-eyed. But really, the point of showing this is just to drive home the point that not all election years are the same. And if you look, for example, at last year, 2025, compared to 2024, which is a presidential year, you have nearly twice as many people voting in that presidential year. So for this year, most comparable election we have for a midterm is 2022, although I will say that we're anticipating pretty high turnout, so we're kind of targeting somewhere between 2022 and 2024. The real difference you'll see if you look at the numbers here is really on that third section down on the age groups. A lot more younger voters come out in those even years. So just any time we're dealing with any kind of exploration of a ballot measure, we like to set the table with that. And just the basic facts about the survey here, you see an example of the text message that was sent to registered voters that are over on the left. And we completed 678 responses. So very pleased with the response rate over the period from the 14th to the 29th of May. So we have a 3.72% margin of error here. And important to note also that these results are weighted to reflect that anticipated midterm election turnout within the city. So let's get right into it with some key takeaways and opportunities kind of at a 30,000 foot level. One thing that's clear is that there is appetite for capital investment, only if it's focused on high priority infrastructure projects as detailed by the respondents in the survey. So more than half say it's extremely or very important to address some of these capital needs, but the strongest priority is for proactive infrastructure maintenance. You'll see as we get into further slides, 81% rate that is either high or medium priority. And when we ask them to choose up to 2 of the projects, 56% choose that. Followed by bike and pedestrian improvements and the preservation of the former school sites for parks and athletic fields at 58%. Those also have strong support. In contrast, at the other end of the spectrum is a new civic center, which is the lowest ranked priority and is viewed as important by only 42% of respondents. As far as the mechanism, we asked voters to consider the idea of both a sales tax and a property tax increase. A proposed 1% sales tax increase received 60% support. 38% would oppose. By comparison, a 10 mil property tax increase receives just 24% support, and 74% would oppose that. So when asked for a preferred mechanism, respondents favor a sales tax increase. 50% said sales tax increase. Only 4% said they would favor a property tax increase. You'll notice that's nowhere near 100% because we also had an option for folks to say cities shouldn't be considering an increase at this time, as we'll see on a future slide here. The idea that non-residents would pay a significant share of sales tax is something that does set it apart for many respondents and makes 56% more likely to support it. Another thing to point out is that voters obviously trust the city. So a majority, 55%, agree that Wheat Ridge is fiscally responsible and spends taxpayer money wisely. That's something that we ask in pretty much any ballot measure survey that we do. And I will say that 55% is almost as high as it gets. Usually we see that number in the mid 40s to low 50s. So, however, at the same time, voters are pretty split on whether there should be this kind of targeted investment now or the idea that we should continue maintaining low taxes even if improvements happen more at a slower pace. And the real reason for that you'll see is that just affordability concerns. That's kind of the biggest obstacle to any path to a ballot measure. So the most convincing opposition messages that we mentioned, like arguments against doing something now, just focus on cost of living pressures and also just prioritizing basic infrastructure over a new city hall. So even among those who support investment, they want to have these other, like what they consider to be the most priorities, roads, sidewalks, and infrastructure maintenance, taken care of rather than administrative facilities, which in this case would be the new city hall or the Parks and Public Works building. So let's get right into it. The first question we wanted to ask, just to get a perception, how would you rate the condition of the city's buildings and public facilities? Only 8% said excellent, but a majority, 55%, said good. So that's 63% right there saying excellent or good. You do have 24% that say fair, a tiny sliver that say poor, 11% say not familiar enough. I don't know how to answer that. So generally, relatively pleased with the condition of buildings and facilities. But when you kind of look 10 years into the future and say, do you think the city has the resources needed for capital improvements to city buildings and facilities over the next 10 years? Very much split on this question. 33% say yes, 37%, the plurality say no, the city doesn't have the resources needed for the next 10 years. And then another 30%, probably what I would say is the most honest answer is don't know, no opinion. So interesting to kind of the split there, that there's clearly a group that says, yeah, let's start having this conversation a little bit because there may not be the resources there. And then here, again, this is very encouraging. 55% agree that the city is fiscally responsible. Only 26% disagree. 19% say no opinion. So then this is really the first time in the survey that we mentioned specifically what we're talking about in terms of capital improvement needs that have been identified. So you see the list there, police and city facilities, bike and pedestrian network improvements, proactive street maintenance, pool replacement, and other projects. So we're introducing the idea that first we're going to speak generally about these things before asking specifically about them. Generally speaking then, how important is it to you that the city address these capital needs? So we're not breaking them out separately now, we're still talking about them as a group. Generally speaking, is it important to address them in the near term, or would you rather continue to defer them? And 14% said extremely important. Another 40% said very important. So that's a majority saying at least very important. The next largest group, 28%, said somewhat important. 5% said not very important. 9% said not important at all. So generally there is, as we mentioned off the top, an appetite to take care of at least some of these projects. A generic tax increase, so we're not saying is this a sales, is this a property, but generally speaking, if additional funding were needed, would you support or oppose a ballot measure that increases taxes or fees to pay for these projects? Pretty much as split as it can get there. 47% say support, 47% oppose. Only 6% say they don't have an opinion there. So really what that shows me is that folks need to know more specifics, that they don't really know what to make of in a general sense, because that list that we've already provided to them covers a whole lot of different things, obviously. So we're going to break up the list of capital projects and ask them, please indicate how much of a priority each of these is to you personally. And these are ranked in order of, folks that say these are a high priority. So 45% said proactive infrastructure maintenance, high priority. Another 36% said medium priority. Clearly that's at the top. Then you have, again, bike and pedestrian network, acquisition of those parks and athletic fields at those school sites, going on down to the pool, parks and public works facility, and the new civic center. So there you can kind of see the split or how they view each of these projects differently with, again, proactive infrastructure maintenance at the top and a new civic center with City Hall and police there at the bottom. If you could only fund up to 2, if the city can only fund some of these projects, choose up to 2 that you would like to see funded first. And again, you can kind of see a clear top 3 and then a clear bottom 3 in this sense. Proactive infrastructure maintenance chosen by over 50% of folks, 56%. Another 39% said bike and pedestrian. Another 35% said those parks and athletic fields. The pool is 23, new civic center, city halls at 13%, and then the combined parks and public works, where 12% would choose that facility. One option, so as we get into the mechanism a little bit, what this could look like, one option for raising revenue would be a 1% sales tax increase. That would raise approximately $11 million annually. Would you support that 1% sales tax increase? Pretty strong support there. 60% would support, 38% would oppose. So that's a really good place to start in any kind of pre-election polling, to be at 60%. Right now today is a pretty strong support for a sales tax at this point. We asked those who said no, hey, what about a smaller 0.5%? Yeah, a third of them would support that smaller amount, but the vast majority, 2/3 of them said no, it doesn't matter the amount, I still would vote no against the sales tax increase. If the city placed a sales tax measure on the ballot, which would you prefer? This is an interesting question. A sales tax that's lowered after one-time capital projects are paid off and then used for ongoing maintenance. So kind of a phased approach where it's set at one level and then reduced. That you do have 28%, and you'll see throughout the survey, it's typically somewhere around 25 to 30% that say, I don't want to be considering this stuff right now. I don't think we should be raising taxes. Then another 21% say a sales tax that expires after a specific number of years or when the bonds are fully paid off. So it wouldn't have that kind of phased continuation. And then another 16% say a permanent tax increase dedicated to capital improvement. So each of those kind of options has at least some support. You have 4% that said, don't really know what to make of this question. I'm going to say no opinion. But clearly, lot to kind of mull over on this slide where, yes, the plurality say that kind of phased approach makes most sense, but there are plenty of folks that have a different opinion. This is what we mentioned up the top. Again, approximately half or more of the city's sales tax revenue comes from non-residents. Does this make you more or less likely to support a sales tax increase? 56% say yes. So we do a lot of this kind of work. Obviously, anytime a municipality is considering a sales tax increase, that's a pretty strong argument that's made in favor of it, is that it doesn't fall solely on residents. On the flip side, talking about a 10 mil property tax increase that would generate approximately $8.4 million annually. Estimating additional cost of approximately $375 per year for a home value at $600,000. So just so that they have that information, because very, very, very few people understand what 10 mils means. 24% support, 74% opposed. So completely different results here on a property tax, which is very much in line with what we see in pretty much every community for the last, I don't know how long. I don't remember the last poll I saw that had a property tax more highly supported than the sales tax when we're asking both. And again, if you have a smaller mill, 12% of those no voters would support, but the overwhelming majority would still oppose a smaller mill. So given those two previous questions, this makes a lot of sense. If you, which approach would you prefer? 50% said sales tax increase. At 31% again said neither. The city should not raise taxes at this time. 13%, interestingly enough, we kind of gave them an option to say, what if it was smaller sales and property? 13% said that. Only 4% said they would choose a property tax increase. Talking specifically about how the ballot measures may be structured, wanting to explore this a little bit. And this is not surprising at all. Voters very much like to be able to evaluate each project on individual merits. So 47% said that. But interesting is not too far behind there is the idea that if we basically broke them into two separate measures, one for community projects, one for those city operational facilities, 41% said, yeah, that sounds good. So I honestly would have anticipated the individual ballot measures for each project to be much higher, to be clearly the preference, because typically that's what we see is folks don't like having to kind of package things together. They'd like to be able to vote on one thing and one thing only. And then 12% even said one ballot measure that covers all priorities together. So I just thought that was interesting. Below are two statements. Please indicate which comes closer to your own view. So this is kind of what we also mentioned off the top of it, where this is very split. So Wheat Ridge has kept taxes low for decades, but now's the time to make a targeted investment. 44% said they're closer to that statement. 45% said they're closer to this statement. Wheat Ridge has kept taxes low, and that's a good thing. Should continue to find ways to maintain infrastructure without raising taxes. So, again, that gives you kind of a muddy picture in terms of what folks want right now. But taken as a whole with all the other results, I do think there is an argument for maybe some more targeted investment. Which, again, best reflects your view. Support establishing a dedicated permanent fund. So this is interesting. It seems to go against what we saw in those past couple of slides, because there is a majority that says they'd want to support establishing a dedicated permanent fund. 34% said transferring funds only when available. 14% said unsure. So a lot of this, it just comes down to how you talk about it and how you introduce things in one way or another. Then we're going to talk specifically about the projects themselves, explain a little bit about each of them. So in this case, Anderson Pool, near the end of its useful life, needs significant investment within the next 2 to 4 years, or will be closed permanently. How important is it to you for the city to replace Anderson Pool and continue to have an outdoor public pool? 61% support. So clearly there's a significant number of folks where that's a priority, and we see that other places in the survey as well. 58% very important, or important to city purchase the parks and athletic fields associated with the schools. So that's very similar. This next one is also very similar, 62%, where this talks about the parks and public works maintenance facilities. So we saw earlier in the survey that there's not a ton of support for facilities like this. A lot of the reason is because folks just haven't heard information about them. So once you begin to tell, even in a couple sentences, or in one sentence there, about how the city's parks and public work maintenance facilities are cramped, outdated, and burdened by deferred maintenance, okay, 62% say that's important to me to take care of that. So that just shows what even a little bit of information can go a long way. 65% believe it's important that the city fills gaps in the bike and pedestrian master plan that were identified gaps within the network. So that one is very strongly supported as well. And this one is at the top. 80% say that, yes, it's important that the city has a dedicated source of revenue to fund annual street maintenance program, including repaving streets, curb and sidewalk repairs, street light repairs, ADA improvements. So this goes back to that. Just generally, there's a lot of support for this kind of infrastructure maintenance. At the same time, the city's current city hall and police headquarters were constructed in the early 70s, have been independently assessed as being in poor to fair condition with significant space constraints. Interesting, you don't see quite as much of a bump for this as you did for parks and public works. So this is still down below 50%. Clearly just a lot of folks, and we'll see this with another question as well that we asked, it's kind of viewed more as a want, not a need for too many folks at this time. And on this next slide, I do have to tell you, I apologize, I'll get you a corrected presentation, but what happened here is our team, the numbers and everything is all right, but the language above the graph is not correct, and you'll see we change it to more supportive. So what this should say is a little bit more context about the new Civic Center. It should say the proposed new Civic Center would be located at the Lutheran Legacy campus and would include City Hall, centrally located police headquarters, community meeting spaces, and public gathering areas that will preserve historic components of the campus and also be developed with new housing and commercial space and maintaining community open space. Does this make you more or less supportive of the project. So that kind of piece of information does move folks to be more supportive when they know, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's where the new city hall was being proposed. So kind of important to point that out is that, again, more information, more explanation generally moves folks towards being more supportive of a given project. And here we just close out the survey with a section of arguments both against and in favor of a ballot measure for capital improvements. And you see what they find most convincing, and this is exactly what I just mentioned a few minutes ago. The most convincing argument is that City Hall is a nice to have, not a need, and that the city should focus on other things first. Also, just the idea that with inflation and the rising cost of living, we shouldn't be raising taxes. The city just passed 2J in 2023, hasn't even finished spending that money. We should wait. The city should find ways to pay for these projects within its existing budget. And then there are already too many tax measures on the ballot. I'm tired of being asked to approve new taxes. All of those, at least 50%, at least 58% find to be at least somewhat convincing. As for the arguments in favor of, generally, and these are all very, very similar. If the city is not like now, public sites such as school properties and civic center site on Lutheran campus will be developed privately. So that's something that maybe folks hadn't considered before and find to be convincing. Again, that argument about non-residents paying sales tax. Investing now is an investment in community pride, safety, and quality of life for the next generation. Folks resonate with that as well. Wheat Ridge's city sales tax rates are among the lowest in the Denver metro area. Even with an increased, residents would still pay less than most neighboring cities. Projects are backed by independent professionals. Basically, the argument that the city has done its homework. Buildings are aging and in poor condition. It's only going to get more expensive in the future. And then a new civic center and community investments will increase property values and attracting business to Wheat Ridge. So you see kind of on down the list in terms of what's most and least compelling. Even that last one, 47% find at least somewhat convincing. Compared to here, we're talking about 66% at least somewhat convincing. So we also just ask, we usually like to take the opportunity to ask if they have any final thoughts. Obviously, not everyone answers this question, but those who do, here were the kind of the core themes. And one is just opposition to additional taxes, just the idea that residents definitely don't want, they're citing rising property taxes, but they're also citing inflation and higher cost of living, so they don't want a property tax at this time. Again, as we saw throughout, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% of respondents. Core infrastructure and basic services. So again, this is the folks that say, I support investment, but it's got to be focused on these things. Frequently mentioning priorities like roads and potholes, sidewalks, water infrastructure, which wasn't part of the survey, but it was mentioned here, and traffic safety. Many contrasted those kind of things against the new city hall. Also strong interest in parks and open space. And then just a substantial group focused on preserving the character and quality of life. So it's very similar to kind of the second bullet point there, but wanting to protect the school sites, wanting to preserve open space, expand sidewalks and bike paths, improve safety, and make sure that public uses of the Lutheran campus remain available. And then I'll just finish out here with survey demographics. Again, where possible, these are weighted to reflect what we anticipate turnout to look like this November. So on things like gender, party affiliation, age range, you see their race and ethnicity, how long they lived in Wheat Ridge. So we've got a pretty good split there. I will say, typically when we do the survey, we have a larger number in that kind of 16 to 30 or more than 30 even. So encouraged that we got a pretty good split, and we got actually a decent chunk of folks that are relatively newer to the city. There you see the rent versus own demographics, whether folks have a four-year college degree. Again, we ask that just so that we can weight it to accurately match the city's adult population. Income, we also have a pretty good spread there. And then there is the turnout across the 4 districts. So I know I went through that fairly quickly, but I will take any questions that you have, and I can always jump back to any slides you'd like me to refer to.
Thank you. Counselors, we'll go ahead and start the discussion. If you look in your packet, there's a number of questions that the city would like sort of answered tonight too. So if you want to include some of those in your comments, that would probably be helpful. Who wants to start us out? Councilor Okada.
Oh, thank you. All my devices turned off. But thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate the presentation. One of the questions that we had as a council that I kind of want to get a chance to explore in the beginning here is, would you mind explaining to us how statistical polling accounts for differences in demographics, whether they're underrepresented or overrepresented in the poll responses that we get? How does statistical polling account for that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I just jumped back to the demographic slide here because this is kind of a starting point of how we're arriving at how to weight the survey. But to answer your question, yeah, of course, when we get the raw survey responses, they don't accurately always match these percentages. It'd be great if they did, but they don't always. So let's just to take an example, let's say we got a survey back because we generally do have a little bit higher female versus male for whatever reason on the responses. So let's say on the survey data, we got 56% were female. So you weight that down a little bit to 53% to match what we anticipate turnout to look like in November. And you basically do that with all of the demographic categories that we ask. I know folks say, why do I have to answer the demographic questions, right? We get a lot of pushback on that sometimes. And it's simply because we want to provide as accurate a survey as possible. And without those demographic questions, we don't know how to weight the survey. So,
Thank you.
Pro Tem Holteen.
Wow, I thought I was going to have to get in line here. I know there's other comments coming. Thank you for this. This is, I think, officially the 5th time you've been in front of me while I'm on council. And I've learned a lot about polling and about developing good ballot questions from polling. So it's really helpful to have a continued trusted partner. I appreciate that. So
of course.
Even then, this is probably the most information dense poll that we've done with you. I think we're coming at a lot of different points of clarification and trying to understand different things. So I'll just say, like, I was a little bit more pessimistic than these polling results are coming back. I'm not surprised. We're getting good feedback that we're doing well in the city. So it's encouraging to see that we have indications of trust and an interest for the city to continue investing in itself. With the request to focus on questions, I would support additional polling based on this. I think that there's some things to drill down on. I mean, I think there's some things we can take off the plate that are in this poll that are helpful. The first time we did this, like, I remember we were really surprised at how poorly the rec center polled. We thought that was going to be like the thing everybody loves so we could tuck in other things. So I think there's some things maybe tonight we can talk about to help identify, like, what are things we don't need to keep talking about. But I think there's enough things that are in kind of these grayish, like 50 to 55%, like 45 to 55%, that I think another round of polling will be helpful and useful for us to make final decisions around. So I'm gonna, with that, like, step back and ask more critical questions after my colleagues have some more time to flesh out their questions. But I know from my perspective, definitely support another round of polling. And I think it would be useful tonight to pull some things off that we are getting clear indicators, like mill levies. I think we can probably take mill levies off future polling.
Yeah, and this, I'll just add real quick. This, sometimes you know exactly what you want to ask, so you don't need 2 rounds of polling. The whole purpose of doing this kind of poll was to really get a bridge to a second poll that has more specific ballot language, has more of a defined plan. So I totally agree. That's something that's very common where we have sometimes a first poll just almost creates more questions than it answers. And so if there is, often it's useful to do a second round of polling. So.
Thank you. Councilor Wood.
I do have a couple of questions, but I think you just answered my first one, because my first one was, is there really time for additional polling? And it sounds like there is.
Yeah.
Because you always saw that, or perhaps we did as well, as a phase 2. So, okay, that's good to know. The one thing that really comes through for me, and probably all of us, is that the proactive infrastructure maintenance, it seems like there's a great deal of support for that. And so that's great, that's wonderful, but then less support for other things. I mean, I don't know what the ultimate result will be on what is determined to be the best path forward, and maybe it's that second poll that's going to lead us to that. But if you phase things over years, I may be asking you to have a crystal ball here, I don't know. But do you have an opinion on that? Maybe this is a good way to put it, as to how successful we're likely to be if we go for the strong items 1 year and then wait a year or 2 years to go for the additional ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think each case is different. I think any time that I'll say this, clearly there is a desire from many folks to make that kind of judgment call, to make that kind of prioritization, and to not do everything at once. And what that does is it gives you the benefit of saying, yes, you voted yes on this, and look at your tax dollars at work, that kind of thing, so that the city can continue to demonstrate, which obviously the city has been doing, because if you look at the opinion that folks have of how the city's managing money, they're generally pleased. But it just gives you that opportunity to say, we listened to you, we heard you, we're making these kind of priorities come first. But as far as whether that's 2 years down the road or 5, I don't know what the magic number is in terms of when is too soon to go back with kind of the lower priority issues. And obviously that's kind of a timeline that's a little bit out of you all's hands. Like for Anderson Pool, for instance, at some point there's a kind of a date where that becomes not usable. And so there's those kind of time constraints factor in as well. But I'm not exactly sure what the right, is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? I'm not sure.
Well, again, I knew I was sort of asking you for a crystal ball, so I appreciate the opinion and the thoughts on that, and just kind of talking it through. Along the lines of things that are time sensitive, I have a question that's probably for staff, and that has to do with the Lutheran campus. I mean, I assume time is ticking, but I don't know if we will reach a time where that runs out, or maybe even if we know that at this point or not.
We will. It's also very, unfortunately, a lot of these projects are very time sensitive. E5X, the developer of the Lutheran campus, is not going to wait too long for us to make a decision on if we can purchase property on that campus to build a civic center. So yes, there would be a time frame. It's probably 1 to 3 years. I think we'd have to have a final decision.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you. And that's all for now. I might have some more later. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for that data. I need to read it a couple times. The polling is great. Yeah, in the past, you've done a great job, the company, of getting some really accurate data. The one thing that I'm just thinking about is it does seem that the things that people can see is probably what they trust the most. And so when they see the rows, they see that, and they understand, like, this is what we need done. And thinking about like the Lutheran Legacy campus or the city hall, I'm just curious, and you probably don't have an answer, is that, it's like, how many of these people have ever come to the city hall or for any type of reason? And so if they haven't, then their perception would be that everything's probably just fine.
Yeah.
And so I know that we have some work to do as far as, sharing that story and trying to explain to the public about the timeline of when we need to make some decisions. And unfortunately, there's a couple things that we have to make decisions very soon. We can't sit around and wait. And so I'm just, there's a lot of projects going on. I'm just, in my mind, I'm thinking about if there's any other. It's obvious the mill levy is probably a hard no. But as far as the sales tax, right now, the weather is such that they would rather postpone that sales tax for a little bit, right? I think right now, just because of the current economic condition. And so that's an issue we'll have to come to a consensus about. But thank you so much.
Yeah, I will say that the conversation around a new city hall or civic center is obviously something that a lot of communities have had to deal with, and it's pretty much exactly this dynamic because you're right, folks aren't in there, like, they're not familiar with the work that may need to be done, and it's especially true for the Parks and Public Works facility. Even fewer ever see the inside of that building. So they drive past it, they say, oh, looks good, there's no holes in the roof, everything must be fine, right? And so that's just generally the perception. Whereas when you talk about infrastructure maintenance, they say, oh, that's citywide benefit, that's everywhere. So it's a very common dynamic, but yeah, it doesn't make it any easier to kind of weed through these issues, so.
Thank you. Councilor Martell.
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilmember set my question up very well, because I was thinking similarly. However, we are, as council, we are launching our Engage Wheat Ridge in July, which is, I don't know if you've heard about our Engage Wheat Ridge project, but we're doing a lot of community connection and community outreach, and with the intention of telling some of these stories. And I guess I'd like your opinion. I know it's an opinion, it's not a crystal ball, but with the numbers that we looked at from the results, when we were talking about like this item or with this additional information, the approval numbers were going up, but then towards the end, there were the general questions of how much would you support a tax increase? And it kind of came back down. So what kind of impact have you seen with these storytelling campaigns we're going to do, where we're in each district and as a citywide, we're going to be having these conversations? Like, how much do you think we can move the needle in this process at this point for an election in November?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it's a case by case basis. I've seen communities that are able to move the needle a lot over a summer. It typically just comes down to how compelling the narrative is about needing these improvements in for instance, the Civic Center or the Parks and Public Works facility. So, I mean, it really just is how big of a bullhorn can you build to get the message out there. I will say that, generally folks are pretty happy with how the city is doing in terms of managing taxpayer money, so that helps. It's not as if you have to clear that hurdle and then clear the other hurdle of convincing them of the need. So I would say it's certainly not impossible. It means that there's a job ahead to kind of tell those stories and explain why these things, even though you may not see them, there is a reason that they're included in these identified capital projects needs. They are approaching needs, not wants, basically.
One follow-up, and I think this might be for Mayor Pro Tem, or might be city. As we move into our district engagement events, can we get some talking points? Can we get some data so we're telling consistent stories throughout the community?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Martell. We met this morning to talk about that, and we're actually kind of waiting for tonight's study session discussion to figure out what those key talking points are going to be. But the intention is to provide all of the council members with some key talking points that will help clarify questions that come out of this discussion, as well as a couple of other things that we're talking about, in addition, whatever is important in your districts. But yeah, the intention is to have a shared set of talking points, so that at the end of July, we're hosting 20 community events throughout the month of July, specifically with the purpose of engaging with our residents around these, so that at the end of that, we'll have a better sense beyond just the polling in terms of with those higher level engaged community members who tend to be sort of influencers of the community where they are on it. So
wonderful. That's kind of a cart horse
definitely,
thing.
Yeah, welcome review and input on that as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this. Just a couple of questions. There was a question, and you said that the verbiage was off.
Yeah.
The contents of that question that were actually on the presentation, where it gave a little bit of a story about City Hall was built in 1970, and was that information ever given on
So
another?
yeah, I'll show you what happened as our team was putting this together. This slide has the accurate information, but if you see as I go to the next, that doesn't change. So yes, it was provided right there, But then this is where the information, this was the information about how it would be located at the Lutheran Legacy campus. So yes, to answer your question, yes, it was
Sure.
right there. So
Mhm.
that's what happened in the presentation.
Got it. Okay. That was an example I was thinking of, with these questions and how they're worded and telling a little bit of a story.
Yeah.
It was proven in another situation earlier of like the results were predominantly no, and then a further question with a little bit of backstory it changed, just as education, just as
Yeah.
we were talking about. So, thanks for that. So to the question of doing another round, we have basically 6 topics right now. And in your opinion, to make another round really get the most bang for our buck with it, what's your feeling about 6 versus 5, 4? What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Let me find a slide that has them listed here. It's tough because there are all kinds of competing factors at play, right? Just because at this point right now, in early June, something isn't necessarily supported doesn't mean you couldn't move the needle with education, because time-wise, it is something that needs to be considered to be put before voters. So, I mean, generally, we saw there was kind of a preference for maybe splitting these 6 into 2, because I do think generally 6 is too much to throw into 1. That's a lot. It kind of makes it look like a total wish list. And everyone, it's like, oh yeah, everyone will find something to like, but on the flip side, everyone will find something they don't like, right? So you have to look at both sides. And what's interesting is that generally what that would be is kind of these top 4 as one ballot measure and these bottom 2 as another, is at least how it was pitched to them. So maybe that's one kind of path to consider, where you're still continuing to tell the story about these city administrative facilities, but understanding that they're not going to be included with the other 4. Maybe that's one potential that could be explored. I'll just, again, like I said, 6 in 1 is a lot. But I don't think anything here is really like, oh no. Well, I guess the only thing I'll say in this survey that we shouldn't ask about again is a property tax. There's no reason to do that. But anything else, I think is still worth telling the story and exploring. So
That's great. Thank you.
Just a quick question. I remember we talked about this in the previous polls. What number do you get that you kind of recommend going forward?
Oh, in terms of pre-election polling?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'd like to see anywhere in like mid-50s to low 60s in pre-election polling. The tricky thing about this is that we don't really have that. Like, we don't have one question that gets us that number.
Right.
But yeah, generally, just because we know this is a snapshot and we don't know what the economy is going to be doing, 4 months from now. Generally, we certainly want to be above 50, but I struggle to put a hard and fast rule on it, mid-50s to low 60s. So,
Because I think what we've seen is the polling is here and then it drops a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. We'll go back to Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen.
Thank you. My experience has been similar with the polling, is that, when you get out there and you have oppositional factors that are working against the issue, then polling definitely starts to drop. So I have a couple questions. First of all, Patrick, I've got a couple questions for you. So I think one of the things that I think we're trying to navigate here is to try and get a better sense of, what are our options outside of a successful ballot measure for moving forward. And I know we've talked about them on the margins, but specifically now that we've gotten a preliminary indication of what interest is at the school sites, do we have a better sense of what the capital investment looks like for being able to maintain the athletic fields on our school sites? Like, how big of a dollar number is that looking now?
Yeah, we don't have exact numbers on what improvements we would make. I mean, both properties, the parks and the fields are actively being used as is. The soccer fields are being used every day during the summer, so there's no immediate need for immediate improvements. It just all depends on what the acquisition of the properties turns out to be. I think, right now, there's potentially some good news that, at least on one of the properties, we may not have to spend a lot of money to acquire it, and we still get the parkland. We don't know yet. We're not 100% there. So we may know more by the time we have to finalize the ballot question. If you do decide to do that, we may, that right now, that's August, end of July, 1st of August, where we're at. So we may know, we may know a little bit more for the schools by then. But
Okay, all right, that is helpful. So taking a look, I feel like there's a couple of things that are emerging as clear to me and some things that are fairly murky. I really loved both times how the second round of polling really helped with clarification, especially being able to drill down to specific questions. So I was really surprised by the support for 1 cent. So I feel like moving forward, better understanding the support between a 0.5 cent and 1 cent. I don't feel like this poll gives me that much clarity on where we are. Last time we did this, we really got in the weeds between like the different levels, and is it 10 years or 15 years or 20, like
Right.
we were really splitting hairs because we were much more laser focused on this. But I feel like we're really being faced with understanding, are we talking a 0.5 cent or a full cent? And then within that, there's a second layer around how do we bundle the ballot initiatives. I don't, as you said, I don't see any outcome where there's like a 0.5 cent for like the candy shop, and trust us, it's going to be fantastic.
Right.
Willy Wonka style. So I think exploring what those types of bundles look like, both in terms of thematic bundling. I'm seeing, instead of like a top and bottom, I'm seeing like an infrastructure and capital, like one-time capital expense. So I think there's a couple of package bundling to play with to see like what bundles resonate with people. And then within that, we're getting some mixed signals in terms of like an expiring sales tax, like a declining sales tax, like there's some different models. Like, does that infrastructure maintenance one, is that just something that gets passed in perpetuity because our streets are always going to need some maintenance, versus do we have this one time like balloon sales tax? So I think really kind of exploring a little bit more around those things.
Sure.
So that we can have some more granular information, not just on like where are people's appetites for sales tax, but like how might we go about bundling those in a way that makes sense to our community, and we have clarity there. And then I think the last thing that kind of stands out to me is that education piece. I think the difficult piece of this, and we knew it going in, is the civic center, like you were saying. But it ain't cheap. It's the biggest capital investment project in the history of Wheat Ridge, right? Yeah. So I think better understanding like what the messaging is that is persuadable to people to understand the importance of that. So those feel like a couple of clarifying points that a follow-up poll could really help us like sit around and better understand like what are the points of engagement, because we'll be landing the plane pretty hot on this, because we'll have to both review that and make some pretty quick decisions around what, if anything, goes to the polls. But I am encouraged that we're looking. I was not thinking we were going to look good for a or a ballot question this fall, and I think this poll is showing us that our community is more ready for it than we thought. So those are my thoughts in terms of what next rounds of polling could help with.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of data here, lots to consider this, and a lot of these questions were knocked around at the workshop from a month ago. The first question I have, though, is if we move forward, do we want to continue characterizing proactive infrastructure maintenance when we're considering a stormwater fee, a utility fee?
Yeah, it can cause a little bit confusion, and usually if we weren't considering a stormwater fee, I think stormwater improvements would be included in that bucket of proactive infrastructure maintenance. So I think we'd have to be very clear that it's not included in that if you're going to be considering a utility still.
A stormwater fee is something that the city can enact without asking the voters to approve.
Correct.
So it seems to me that when I look at proactive infrastructure maintenance, I think of stormwaters and that is one of the biggest infrastructure expense after roads that the city has. So if we somehow separate that out and instead of proactive infrastructure maintenance, the question is roads, streets, and highways and that sort of thing, and just make it very clear what we're talking about there. The other point I want to make, though, is that this year is going to be some serious ballot fatigue. There's going to be a whole bunch of different initiatives, both initiated and passed down, that are asking for more money. So we have to be very careful in how we do. I think we're almost at the point where the Civic Center ballot question may be moot at this point. I think we may want to step back and think about another go-around in a couple of years, because I really don't believe that when people see a new Civic Center and police headquarters, that they understand what it is. And I understand that when we ask the question, we describe it a little more about some of the things that will be there. The support improves, but I don't think people generally understand that we're talking about a civic center and not just office buildings for city staff and a police headquarters. I remain optimistic that we're going to be able to convince the Jefferson County Library to locate a library at the Civic Center. I'm not going to let go of that one. So I think if we were to describe in a second poll a Civic Center that includes more than just office space for staff and police headquarters, it includes a library, it includes other amenities, it becomes a true civic center that support would increase or at least strengthen. But the other half of that is that I don't believe we told the story sufficiently about how badly we need to move out of the existing city hall and the deficiencies and the inadequacies of the building and the police headquarters and the fact that we've got staff spread in several locations around the city. I think that story should be told better, and I don't think we will have time between now and the election to do that. The other concern I have is that I was very disappointed to see that the moving the Parks and Rec and Public Works into a new facility is single-digit support. And that could be another example of us not telling that story well enough, and the importance of doing that. And maybe if we do another survey, we describe the benefits that would accrue from a moving and investing in a new facility for those two departments. So I think the ballot strategy should be that we, and the point about instead of lumping all of the questions into one, just say, here's a bunch of ideas we have. Specific. I think we should zoom in on one or two specifics for this year, because we're going to be fighting with a lot of other initiatives that are going to be asking for money, and they'll probably be able to tell their story very well. So we're going to have to convince the voters that when they go and mark their ballot, that they understand what it is that Wheat Ridge is asking. Thanks.
Councilor Okada. Thank you, Mayor. Could we go back to the slide that shows the response for top two, if you were to choose to? I've got a kind of a specific statistical question about this, because my temptation when I first saw this was to take this purely as a ranking, to think about it that way, and I think that's the intention of the question just on its own. But these don't sum to 200% because we had probably incomplete respondents to it. Like maybe some people skip the question altogether. Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly. So they're able to choose up to two. They could choose 0, they could choose 1, or they could choose 2.
That to me makes this slide actually tell me just a tiny bit more. I mean, but I wouldn't encourage the other council members to read too much into this. But to me, that feels like the 13 and the 12 that we have at the bottom are actually, somewhat optimistic in the way that they're expressing it. Like there are people that put that at their top choice. Certainly not as many as the others, but the folks in the spread that we had in that space does speak to me in a context where my instinct is to just keep this as ranking and to think about that in its relative position, but there is actually a magnitude distinction. There's another signal in there that I think is important for us to keep in mind. I do have a question too. This seems impossible to put onto a poll, but I want to ask it anyway, just in case a miracle occurs.
Okay.
The competition that's on the upcoming that's going to be on the upcoming ballot is going to be a really important piece for us to think about, because I feel like a lot of what we're imagining for a potential ballot measure on our side is probably going to be deeply different in the context of having different things on there. Is there any way to poll in an accurate way to be able to identify what that competition might do to our potential?
Yeah, I mean, we actually do that kind of work quite often when you have a lot of overlapping government entities like we do here in Jefferson County. So for instance, typically you don't want to have it at the very start of the survey, like, oh, by the way, there's a bunch of other stuff, because we don't want to taint the results to this right off the start. But at the end of the survey, we'll say, thank you for your time, the survey is almost done. As you may know, Jeffco Public Schools, Arvada Fire Protection, whatever the list is going to be, may also place a tax measure on the ballot this November. If that's the case, and then we kind of almost have a matrix question and say, if all 3 of these are on the ballot, how would you vote? And they say, yep, I'd vote yes on this and this, but no on this. So it's certainly possible to ask that. What gets difficult is if we want to go into much specifics about what those other entities are doing. That gets trickier because just from we want to make sure that we're accurately portraying what it is being considered by those entities. It's better to just be generic and say, these entities are also considering a tax increase. And, sometimes you can say whether it's because Jeffco Public Schools is going to be a property tax increase. It can't be a sales tax increase. But some of the other ones, it's just better to say generic tax increase and see how, because you're right, like the one thing I can tell you for sure is it doesn't help, right? So you need to know how much it hurts, right? Like that's the question that you're trying to get at. And so, yes, we do have ways of accomplishing that, so.
Thank you, Ryan. That's super helpful. And that's great news. I just wasn't imagining a mechanism for which we could get that stuff done, especially thinking about how complicated that is. Since we're getting kind of deeper into the conversation, I want to throw out some of my opinions here as well. I feel I'm seeing the 6 options that we have here on the slide that we're talking about here. I do feel that if our entire constituency knew what we know now, that they would support all 6. I feel like if that to me makes it a question on how well do we do in July. That makes it a question about how much competition are we going to be having. So I feel like those are the pointed pieces that we would be able to approach there. I do disagree about waiting because I don't know if we would. This is actually a question. Would we benefit from waiting, or would we benefit from taking 2 attempts at it, or multiple attempts at it? Something to leave in the air unless there's an expert response to that. I imagine that's a difficult area for us to think about, but it's in my opinion, I think us having it on the ballot this time around is a good idea. I do like the idea of splitting it. So it seems like the people we polled, I like the idea of splitting it as well. It seems like the natural way is to be able to have the one that is a little bit more popular and the one that's less popular, even though I'm a little tempted that we might find some way to interlace them in a way to give both pieces a better chance. I'm not sure if there's some wisdom there, but I want to leave that up in the air for anybody else to grab if they have any thoughts about it. And I feel like I had one more thing, but for the sake of time, I'll let it go.
Thank you. Councilor Martell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Okada, because that was literally my question. If we could have a polling question about competing asks. So thank you for covering that. And so I guess with that answer, I will also say, kind of just give some of my thoughts to these questions. I definitely support additional polling. I do have a question on the timing of that, and I think it would be, I don't know like how much time we have with doing polling, getting results back, having time before the election, but I would really advocate for the second survey going out early August so that we could have our month of July and then get the survey out. What am I missing?
Yeah,
Too
we'd
late?
ha-
That is
we'd-
too late?
We'd have
Okay.
to have a ballot question drafted for first reading for August 10th.
For August 10th? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, maybe just as late so we could
yeah,
get some of this,
it'd have to be
these
the very
storytelling
end of July.
happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ish.
That's fair. That was a
Yep.
question. So,
Yep.
I also think that I would be in support of separating this into two asks. And look, my brain naturally goes to those top four grouped together, and then the two, the Civic Center and the Public Works Facility. But that's not a hill I would die on. Yeah, I think that I support moving forward with more polling.
Quick question for you. You worked with a lot of communities. How successful are most communities if they don't get it on the first try, getting it the following year or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a valid point. I mean, the way you have to look at it, and I think this is kind of what you were alluding to, is that, you know, sometimes people fall in the trap of saying, oh, it failed, so we're back to square one. It's like, no, you've had a campaign and it's going to continue to educate people. They don't all forget about everything you told them. It just wasn't the right time, or there's too much on the ballot, et cetera. Generally, I think it's, I mean, as long as there's enough of a compelling case to be made. I mean, look, if something gets on the ballot and gets rejected 80-20 or something, it's like, oh, why would you put it back before voters at that point, right? But if it's close, if it's kind of in that realm, and it fails by a couple points, I think there's a very strong argument for going back to voters and saying, look, we heard you, like maybe tweak it a little bit or something, make some adjustments rather than throwing the exact same question back at them. But I think there's definitely a strong argument for even after a failure, going back even as soon as the next year, because what it really shows is like, we're serious about these needs. Because sometimes what happens is you go, we'll see it happens more with our school district clients, honestly. They'll go and they'll fail, and then they'll say, you know, woe is me, we're not going to go next year. And then people say, oh, you must not have really needed it if you didn't come back and ask us for the next year or the next 2 years. So there's certainly that dynamic that can come into play as well. I definitely, it's not something where, oh no, if you fail, you can never go back again. Like, certainly don't fall into that thinking, so.
Thank you. Councilor Quinn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just thinking out loud with Councilor Martell here, I'm just like, what are we going to gain with another round of polling? And the reason I'm saying that, I'll be like, are you going to be more in favor of a 0.7 or a 1%? Do you want to drop the last two? Because I feel that the folks that are going to vote yes on this are going to vote yes no matter what. If it's 0.7, 1%, if we have all 6, or we just have 4. I'm not, my opinion, I'm not seeing the data that says we're going to flip anything. So I'm just curious, what do you all think, and what would those questions be?
So yeah, the real benefit of the second round of polling, really this is kind of this poll was kind of like letting them in on you all's kind of brainstorming session a little bit, right? The real benefit of the second poll is it would be more focused, and there would be actual ballot language that would say, shall taxes be increased, whatever amount, for these things. That gives you just a much better read on what folks think than this survey where, yes, you're asking for their help to kind of prioritize and make decisions, but there's nothing in here that say, right now, today, shall taxes be increased for these things, Like we don't have that necessarily in this survey. So that would be like the main benefit. But I realize that means that there's, some decisions that have to be made, even in drafting that poll. Are there things that we like? Do we want to continue to talk about the Civic Center? Do we want to set that aside? 2 versus 1 ballot measure. What's in what are the groupings? Like those kind of decisions would need to be made before the survey is drafted, because we want to have questions that are actually helpful looking forward to November. So that's kind of it's more focused than this survey would be. It'll be a little bit shorter than this survey was, and it's more just kind of getting down to brass tacks. How would you vote if this is what we propose to you? Which we kind of have a little bit of that in here, but not really. We kind of have them standalone, but never together, which obviously matters. And that, to Councilor Hulteen's point, we don't have the what about 1, what about 0.75, what about 0.5? Because I suspect that you're kind of right, but to me, it's more the folks that will vote no are going to vote no on any amount. And you do kind of have those soft yes voters that may be kind of feeling, not great, but I like this stuff. So if you did drop it to 0.75 instead of 1, maybe you can, kind of see where folks land and what's the preferred number. But they really just got to understand, with this number, we could accomplish these things, and with this number, we could accomplish, is it those same things at a lower level, or is it a different set of things? Like, that's the kind of decisions that would need to be made in drafting that second poll. So,
Thanks. Different group of citizens that go out to, or
sure. So
just total random again? Or?
Yeah, totally random again. Some folks may get this one and also got the first one. Some folks, may, the city's doing polling. They didn't even know about the first round. So it'll be a random sample. So
thanks.
Councilor Wood.
So I guess I really wanted more than anything just to weigh in on some of the things that have been said and going back to the questions that have been asked. I would agree with what some have said about grouping it into 2 groups, with the top 4 being together and the bottom 2 being together, rather than having 6 separate things. I would support going for another poll, and because I'm convinced that we could get more information that would help us that would lead us in the direction that would seemingly be the best to go. And so I would definitely support more polling. And I would say that at this point, I'm not ready to give up on any of these. I mean, I realize that things are very different from the top and the bottom, but I think Councilor Okada convinced me of that to some degree, but also just because of the timing of things and the need for it. And if we can get the information to make the best decisions with, well, then that would be good. And then lastly, to some of the things that Councilor Ohm and Councilor Larson have said about, Councilor Ohm, you really started this with residents not always even understanding the importance of City Hall to them, or city facilities, or the parks facilities, or they don't use them, or they haven't been there. I mean, that's the story that we somehow have to tell, and I don't know when the time to tell that is. Is it post-polling, or is it in some of the questioning that we might ask? And to that point, though, I worry that if it's a little too leading, then it could get faulty results for us. But I know that's your job to understand those things and not let us do things like that. But I would support a second poll, and I wouldn't want to drop anything at this point.
Councilor. Oh, it's already been answered. Okay. Then we'll go back to Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen.
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite conversation, except for bike lanes, but bike lanes are in here. So I really appreciate a couple things, in particular, Councilmember Okada's sort of, I think of it as the breaking point. I think to Councilmember Quinn's question about what are we going to learn through another round of polling, is we're going to better understand like what bundle will get support. I think the miracle question that we didn't think was going to happen that's doable is to better understand, in the face of a crowded ballot, what is the breaking point, so that we can better prioritize within that. I mean, in a vacuum, we can dream and put things together, but it is going to be a pretty busy season. So I do think this, again, where I started, the second round is going to be really helpful. Conferring a little bit with Mayor Stites, I think the bundles that make sense and kind of aligned with some of the polling input we're getting is looking at bundling the top two, because those are the most popular, but also are the two that would fall under sort of that like ongoing, that everyone sees it, it's at the end of their block, that type of community wide. So that's one bundle. What's invisible in this whole thing is nobody knows that like the parks and the athletic fields is like $10 million compared, well, maybe a little bit more, but it's like $10 million compared to like City Hall, which is like over $100 million. So the weighted investment within this is like what we've got to fiddle around with to look at, like if we're talking about a half cent, what package fits within that. So I think that's the piece maybe to work with Patrick on, is like, how does that bundle within those breaking points? And then I think it's really important to understand how does, with a more focused poll, how does the Civic Center and combined Parks and Rec move with the additional information and being, focused on differently as like a one-time sunsetting, or, like how do we really stand it out? I believe with Lutheran, if I'm remembering correctly, that survey actually included some images.
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to say, I think images would be a big part of telling the story of this building and Parks and Public Works maintenance facility, because that's often like the only way that you can really convey, or it's a very helpful thing to do. So,
We were gonna do some on this first round, but we decided to wait.
yeah, exactly. We didn't want to, make their brains explode with overload of information and images. But certainly in the second round, we would include some images of those two facilities specifically. The others, maybe there's a compelling, image or two of Anderson Pool that folks may not be familiar with, but the others, there's not really much of a need. So,
Yeah, I think that helps. I mean, there is some concern if we don't get City Hall if other things pass and we don't pass City Hall, it's going to be harder the next go. I mean, it becomes a super uphill thing. So I personally don't want to give up on it yet. I want to see how persuadable and movable it is. We may find that there's a breaking point. I mean, we may know more after this next round to give us more clarity on whether to hold off on that. But anyway, so those are my thoughts on the bundles, is that the top two really neatly combined as very popular and also sort of fit in that category of like ongoing things that people want to see. And the other ones are sort of these one-time, like bigger investments. So it might be helpful.
Right.
That might be a good bundle. And then to take a look, then working with City Manager Goff on like, how do we break that across like half cent, 3/4 cent, so that with the question of what are people's breaking points on a crowded ballot, we can make an informed decision around that.
and obviously to your point, some of these items, like you said, lend themselves more to a sunset than others, right? And so that's a piece that we didn't really get into in this survey.
Yeah.
We did ask a question about, a permanent tax versus the phased, option, but it would be beneficial to kind of group them together such that some are ongoing, some have that sunset attached to it, which we know will make at least some difference in how folks evaluate them. If it's not just something in perpetuity, if it's more of a one-time cost, like you said.
Yep. And then just to address some of the timing. So Patrick, you said August 10th is our first reading for ballot language.
Yeah, so we'd have to have some language decided on, like around August 1st, probably.
Yep.
Ish. Yep.
So what we'd probably have to do is special study session at the second council meeting in July.
Yeah, I was looking at the calendar. I mean, July 30 or 27th would be a regular meeting, which we could do a study session there, finalize the language so that we could have it ready for first reading on the 10th.
Yeah, so maybe that could be our second polling study session.
Yep.
And then our first study session in August
August 3rd.
August
Yep.
3rd. Then
Yep.
we, at that one, could do the ballot language.
Yep.
Okay, so that's our timeline that we're working off of.
So it would be, we would do the polling mid-July, which is kind of a happy medium. It gives some of the time to have the community meetings that are still going to be ongoing even as we're doing the polling, but it's not, quite so late that it, doesn't fit with our timeline. So we'd be looking at that. That makes sense to me, so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilor Larson.
And thank you, Mayor. And I brought this up at the workshop, and I want to throw this out at the staff folks one more time, and then I won't bring it up again. This has to do with taxes on gasoline and diesel. And we have plenty of those places where people buy gasoline and diesel in Wheat Ridge, but gasoline is exempt under state law from sales tax, from local sales tax. Is there a way we could apply a per gallon excise?
I don't know. I don't remember that coming up at the workshop. I don't know if we have, that's a good question. We can look at. I don't, that question has never come up before. We can do an excess tax on cigarettes or marijuana. I don't know about fuel. That might be a different.
What I understand of the state code is pretty specific about gasoline not being part of sales tax, but it doesn't, as far as I can tell, it doesn't mention applying an excise.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
So,
We'd have to-
so anyway, just, I want to throw it out there, and if you guys could think about that a little bit and maybe get back to us on if it's possible, because while it may not be as much as we bring in general sales tax, it would help.
Councilor Snell.
Thank you. Well, how long was this survey open for this first round?
It's open for 15 days.
Okay, and
So we do a little bit shorter window for the second.
okay, that's what I was thinking about, just with the timeline that we were talking about. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments?
I think we have direction. We weren't looking for specific answers to all those questions. Those were just to help with discussion. I have really good notes. I think it was pretty clear on what direction you want to go with the second round, and we actually have time. We can bring back a draft survey at a future study session for you to see before it goes out. So, yeah, I think.
Councilor Okada.
Just want to double check, because I might be the only one out of the loop on it. It feels like we talked a lot about splitting it 2 and 4. Do we feel like we have enough direction and consensus on how that 2-4 split is? Because I might have heard a couple of different ways.
Yeah, we did hear several different ways, but we'll work on it together and bring it back. I think there might be a couple of different options there.
That makes sense, especially in the I'm realizing now in the context of like what the mix in price is going to be. Price. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Holt, or Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen.
I just want to clarify, study session might be really tight with the schedule, just because we've got,
all of them.
Yeah. Well,
We'd have to do it at a regular meeting.
Study session.
Yep.
But even without that, like with the 4th of July holiday, like
Yeah,
even if we hadn't made the decision to focus on Engage Wheat Ridge. So I just want to share, there may not be a study session on it, but like last time, sharing some of the information in advance so we can put eyes on it. But I don't think a study session discussion is probably feasible because we have a pretty packed schedule. Yeah.
We'll talk.
All right.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, City Manager, you said you have what you need?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, probably more than we need.
Well, thank you again for your hard work, and you've done great for us so far, so we really appreciate it. Let's see, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Councilors, do we have anything you want to add before we wrap it up for the evening? All right, we will be back here next Monday for a study session, correct? All right, thank you. Have a great week. Be safe.